5-4. Greetings, everyone. I am calling to order the meeting of the City of Salem Budget Committee for April the 24th, 2024. And can the recorder please call the roll?
Member Belacheks?
Present.
Member Cohen?
Present.
Member Allen?
Present.
Member Manville?
Present.
Member Vieira Brandel?
Present.
Member Stapleton?
Present.
Member Phillips?
Here.
Member Gwen? Absent. Member Gonzalez?
Here.
Member Julie Hoy? Here. Member Nordyke? Absent. Member Varney?
Here.
Member Chris Hoy?
Here.
Member Dixon?
Here.
Member Curtis?
Here.
Member Gayer?
Here.
Member Vice Chair Nishioka?
Here.
Chair Brown?
And present. Everyone, please join me. Pledge allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It is so good to see everyone again this evening. So greetings to everyone, all these beautiful and shining faces of the committee. So good to see you. Staff, as always, thank you for all your hard work behind the scenes and, being our feet on the ground. Thank you. And for all the visitors that are here, so good to see you. Last week, we had a standing room crowd only. Today, not so much, but nevertheless, I still think we're going to have a great evening of conversation and talking about our budget and, of course, next steps. And one of the things I'm always encouraged to say is that, we are striving our best to be a healthy team and, of course, answering as many questions as we can among ourselves, but also those individuals that may not be here tonight will have the opportunity to represent them as well, just making sure that all voices can be heard and faces can be seen. We do have some additions to the agenda, which will include a staff report and an errata report. Could I please have a motion to approve the additions to the agenda?
I move that we approve the additions to the agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And it was second. Who was that second? Was that? Thank you, Member Varney. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand and saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. Motion passes. We do not have any public testimony tonight. I'm disappointed a little bit. I was getting excited to see just a whole line of people just lined up. I'll probably get my wish for next week, right? And let's approve.
So you did the minutes? Yeah. You did the errata? Did we do a motion on the errata, two errata items?
No. My apologies. Something just looked off in my notes. So for the action items, the erratas, may I have a motion to approve the two errata items before us?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Member Manville, and second by Member Stapleton. Is there any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none, and the motion passes. We're going to move on to information items.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think we still have minutes to approve from last week.
My apologies. I thought I did that.
You didn't do the urban renewal.
Oh, the urban renewal.
No,
Maybe
We
I
haven't
missed
done-
it. We did the additions. Did we approve the minutes also?
no, we have not.
Okay.
See, we're on the same page. I thought we did that too.
Chair Brown,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
move that we move the minutes for our meeting on April 17th for the City of Salem and Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Vice Chair, and second, I think it was by Member Phillips. Thank you, CFO. And we're still back to you, CFO. Eagleston, would you please come forward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to go over the information items. You have,
We didn't vote. We need to vote on the,
I'm striking out,
it's all right. You're doing fine.
striking out, striking out.
So we need to vote.
On the errata.
Unless you want to go over the minutes, but otherwise we're just ready to vote.
Yeah, let's get a vote on the minutes. For some reason, I want to slow this process down because I feel like we're moving too fast. Yes, can I get a motion on the floor to approve the minutes, please?
We have that. We're just ready to vote.
Second, any room for discussion? You sure? You're positive? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Is it okay to move now?
Yes.
Okay, great. CFO Eccleston, please come forward, sir.
thank you, Mr. Chair. You have three information items this evening. One is a summary of Budget Committee actions through your last meeting, and then two staff reports with responses to member questions. I know that the second half just got to you earlier this afternoon, so feel free to ask questions tonight, or we can address any additional questions you might have at the next meeting. I will note there are a couple items in the first packet that relate to the tabled motions that we'll address at the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. CFO. There are no questions from the members? Question on the floor. Yes, sir. Member Allen.
Just a quick question for the CFO. You've probably given it, and I'm just not finding it, but the slides for the presentations, for example, the presentation from last week, was that included in information that you provided us?
For the one for last week?
Yeah.
Yes, they were on your desk. They're also posted online. I'm happy to resend them.
Was it included in an email that I missed?
I don't believe it was in an email,
Okay.
no.
All right, then I can go find them. Thank you.
Or any other questions on the floor from last week? Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Member Cohen.
It's not a question necessarily, it's more of a statement. So looking at the agenda items, looking at the memorandum from the city attorney, his ruling is that the Salem Kids Relays and the movies in the park would most likely not qualify for TOT funding. So I wanted to bring that to people's attention because that'll probably need to be changed for my motion that was tabled. The other thing I'd like to discuss, and it might just be something that needs to be brought up by council to the Tourism Promotion Advisory Board, is that with the Salem Kids Relays, and I'm thinking of this especially because of the event that's happening this Saturday in the same location. For those that are unaware, the Awesome 3000 is happening this Saturday. It is truly an awesome event that's been going on since the 80s that brings thousands of kids and thousands upon thousands of grandparents, parents, out-of-state people to our community, and they bring those tourism dollars to our community as well. So I find it curious that the Salem Kids Relay, by that same notion, would not qualify. That being said, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a JD. Didn't want to waste $300,000 on that. So I do want to say that I'm frustrated that it's being struck. And I want to challenge this committee to find the funds to fund events like this, particularly because I am a father of 3 kids, and there are many, many children within this community that are being hit especially hard with this budget. This budget, I would say, is the most unfamily unfriendly two-family budget probably since the 2009 budget. With the loss of parks, the loss of splash pads, trying to tell my daughter that, yes, I understand Riverfront Park's going to have a splash pad, but the other neighborhood community parks won't. It just seems like we're getting hit on the chin. And so I challenge this group to find the money to support these important projects, these important programs to help out the families of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cohen. There was a little small opportunity in there, and maybe let me know, CFO. Does Mr. City Attorney need to address anything that was said from Member Cohen, just to kind of make sure we just clean the air? Is that okay, sir? Thank you so much.
Dan Atchison, City Attorney. Regarding the memorandum, I did speak to Mr. Jason Brandt this afternoon. He is the president and CEO of ORLA, the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association. He told me, based on the fact that the funds that are being utilized from working capital of the Transit Occupancy Fund came from the ARPA money that was revenue replacement. Because that is the source of funds, they don't have any objection to using that for library operations. Notwithstanding that, I came to that was one of the bases of my conclusion. I had other reasons as well, but I didn't want to argue that point. When the judge says yes, you sit down and say thank you. So, regarding the other events, it isn't black and white. It's not a clear line. In my analysis, to use these funds for operations, to use transit occupancy tax for operations, it's got to either be a cultural facility, which these events clearly aren't, or it has to be a major tourist attraction, and that is loosely defined in the council policy. And just based on my analysis, I didn't feel those events met that standard based on the information I had from the Parks and Recreation staff regarding the events. They're almost overwhelmingly residents from Salem that participate in it.
Got it. Thank you for that clarity, sir. Are there any questions about that, members? Question on the floor. Yes, Member Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for the city attorney. As I read your memo, it indicated that restrictions on federal funds like ARPA funds that had been placed in the Cultural and Tourism Fund would apply, but state restrictions would not apply to the ARPA money. Is that correct?
Correct. So the state law regarding what the state calls the transient lodging tax, what we call the transient occupancy tax, applies to revenue from that tax. These funds are not revenue from that tax. They are state or federal grants.
May I ask a follow-up to that?
Please, sir.
What restrictions apply then? What federal restrictions apply to the uses of that money?
There are a litany of restrictions which we have been working through for the past couple of years. I can't tell you off the top of my head the thousands of restrictions that apply to them. But Josh, if you want to, we had a short discussion prior to the meeting. We have finished our reporting on the ARPA funds. We will be finishing that in June, and the restrictions on that, the federal restrictions, will have eased, is my understanding, but I'll let Josh explain that.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Curtis.
Thank you. So were those ARPA funds specifically for economic development or tourism? Maybe I should know that, but I don't. I mean, why did they go into the TOT fund?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So the ARPA funds were used for revenue replacement, and the restriction is for the use of general government services. Since they've already been replaced, we've already justified them with the provision of government services, so they're not restricted in their current state.
If I may.
Continue.
And so then if they were awarded to the city for general government services, why did they end up in the TOT fund?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first tranche of revenue replacement, several funds were hit especially hard with the pandemic. The Culture and Tourism Fund was one of them. Transportation was another. Downtown parking, as you might imagine. The general fund. So the first tranche was allocated across those funds.
That makes sense. And also, I would just say that from my experience in tourism, one of the criteria, I guess, that the lodging industry and the tourism industry looks at for use of those funds for events is that does it generate overnight visits? That's a big, I mean, I don't know if that's in the law. I don't know the law well enough. But, you know, kids relays, maybe grandparents do come in, but is it generate, are the bulk of the visits overnight? Because then that would benefit the TOT.
Thank you. I appreciate answering those questions for us, Mr. City Attorney, Mr. CFO. Okay, let's continue. On to public hearings. Number 6, the capital improvement plan and the staff report. Our item tonight will be on the agenda to conduct a public hearing on the proposed capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2025 through 2029. The public hearing is now open, and I invite James Wharton has to provide a presentation of the CIP. Take it away, sir.
Thank you. That answers my question. All right, hello everyone. My name is James Wharton Hess. I am an analyst in the budget office, and I'm here to present the 2025 to 2029 CIP. So I wanted to start off with what is a CIP. So a CIP is a capital improvement plan. It's a 5-year plan for capital spending. Like a budget, a CIP matches expected revenues with planned expenditures, but unlike a budget, it doesn't actually make appropriation authority. That being said, there is a relationship between the budget and the CIP. The CIP is currently governed by Council Policy C9. That it may be amended in July when City Council takes that up, but it is governed by the currently adopted Council Policy C9. In addition to that, ORS Chapter 223 requires that projects financed by system development charges, you may hear them referred to as SDCs, be part of an adopted financial plan, and the CIP meets that requirement. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how projects are identified. CIP projects are identified in multiple ways, including via infrastructure assessments, planning processes, plan documents, and updates. For urban renewal, master plan updates, strategic action plans, and advisory board meetings provide guidance and direction for included projects. The city's various infrastructure plans, such as the Transportation System Plan, or TSP, and the Comprehensive Parks Master Plan are also important to the process and contribute to CIP development. In terms of public outreach, the CIP is noticed to the public in several ways, and often the projects that are included in the CIP are part of a master plan or other process that includes outreach to neighborhood associations and advisory boards. The CIP webpage includes information about the CIP development process as well as prior year CIP documents. The website also includes a project request form that allows residents to submit projects to be considered for the CIP. Those request forms are available year-round and can be submitted anytime. Also on the website is an interactive map where you can find projects and click on them. It'll show a detail of those projects, and it also has an overlay for wards so you can see what projects are in your ward. Each year, the public hearing is held, that's this, to receive feedback on the plan. The public hearing is noticed to the Statesman Journal, and it is posted on the city's website. So as I mentioned, the CIP and the budget are different but similar. So the CIP includes only those projects that have identified funding. There are a litany of other projects that need funding that do not have it. Those will not be in the CIP. Only projects that have identified funding appear in the CIP. It only includes projects that cost $50,000 or more. I mentioned earlier that council would be considering in July a policy that would raise that to $100,000, but for now it is $50,000. And it only includes new funding. So what happens is that first year of the CIP, you see, rolls into the budget, as well as carryover projects, which would have been in previous CIPs, or sometimes council adopts projects mid-year, so those also appear in the budget, but not the CIP. It includes reappropriations, projects that don't meet that minimum CIP threshold, so projects under $50,000 right now, as well as some administrative costs. So most of the CIP is made up of pages that look like this, and I just want to walk you through how to read these project pages. So in the top left-hand corner, you will see the city's project number. That's the unique identifier how we track projects. Under that is the category of projects. In this case, this is a streets project. It includes the neighborhood association or neighborhood associations that the CIP project takes place in. And under that is the title. Most projects are scored, and if they do have a score, that will appear in the top right. And under that will be the ward or wards that the project takes place in. So the second half of this is the funding. On the top row, you'll see columns for every fiscal year of the CIP period, as well as the funding source or funding sources that make up that project. In this case, there's two. Those total up to the current total CIP amount, and then under that is the amount funded in prior years. So at the very bottom, you will see the total expected project cost. And at the very bottom of each page is a small description of the project. So before we get into this CIP, I did want to highlight some of our accomplishments. So in fiscal year 2024, 14 construction projects have been completed. That includes the Civic Center Customer Service Center and the Union Street Bikeway projects. Those are both pictured here. In addition, 9 projects will be starting. Some of those are listed here. That includes the Minto Brown Island Park, parking lots 2 and 3, and a photo of the current state of that parking lot is here. And then a couple total CIP highlights that we thought were worth mentioning are the Bennett Dam Complex Improvements Project. This project is displayed on page 86 of your CIP document. It's estimated to cost $35 million. $25 million of which is expected to be funded by a federal grant. The project will replace the existing Upper Bennett Timber Crib Dam with an adjustable crest dam, which will help to secure the long-term water supply for the city of Salem. And that project is in conjunction with the Santiam Water Control District. Another project is the Fisher Road Northeast Urban Upgrades Project. That project is displayed on page 62 of your CIP document. It's anticipated to cost $18.8 million over the 5-year CIP period, and it's mainly funded by the 2022 Safety and Livability Bond. This project takes place between Silverton Road Northeast and the east-west curve, including new curbs, sidewalks, bike lanes, stormwater treatment, and streetlights. It also includes some traffic signal replacements at Sunny View Road Northeast and pedestrian crossings at Beverly Avenue Northeast and Devonshire Avenue Northeast. Full funding for this project is in out fiscal years. So a quick overview of what's in the CIP. It's $490.7 million over the 5-year period. That's 194 projects, 26 funding sources, and 11 categories of infrastructure. On page 14, you will see this results area summary graph that largely resembles the budget book. As you can imagine, most projects in the CIP are in the safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure category, but there are a couple other results areas represented in the CIP document. There's a couple ways to look at the CIP. The first is by funding. As you can see, the 2022 Safety and Livability Bond, shown here is the GOCI bond, and utility rates make up the vast majority of funding for the CIP. There are other funding sources. Some of those in that other category include utility and transportation SDCs, donations, lodging tax, or TOT, streetlight rates, and radio rates, among other things. The CIP project by group largely resembles that other graph. You can see that utilities makes up a similar portion by project size, as well as transportation, and that's followed by municipal facilities and a smaller section for community facilities. So I just wanted to get into what is in each one of those groups. So community facilities is $33.6 million worth of projects. That's 4 historic structures projects and 43 parks projects. Municipal facilities is $85.2 million. That's 11 airport projects, which is up significantly due to some significant funding from FAA. Building projects, 13 of those, 7 IT projects, and 10 parking structure projects. Transportation is $180.2 million. That's just the 1 streetlights program, as well as 81 streets projects. And finally, utilities is $191.7 million. That's 15 stormwater projects, 28 wastewater projects, and 21 water projects. So that concludes the public hearing. Representatives from the city departments are available to answer any questions after public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wardenhess. Appreciate that. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to provide any testimony regarding the CIP? Seeing none.
We have one non-staff person in the room. He says no. You're it. So if it's not you, it's nobody. You're the only non-staff.
Mine is just general.
Wait, you did have a comment?
In general.
Well, by all means. And when you say it's in general, is it in response to the presentation that we just saw, CIP, the capital improvement plan?
No, sir. It's in general.
And when you say in general, what's the topic? I'm curious.
Well, I watched on video.
He can't speak.
Okay, well, and before you start, we can't have a conversation like this. So it's either you want to have to say something there, we can explain it, give you the actual time frame. We'll give you 3 minutes.
For the record, my name is Tim Cowan, and I'll just give you just a quick little background. I was a senior vice president for First Interstate Bank. I ran the Mid-Valley, Central and Eastern Oregon, and in doing so, I had to produce certain goals, both increase in revenue but cost expenditures, and I had to report it quarterly because of the impact on the stock market. So it had results that were public, and when I listened to the library, boy, wasn't that moving? I couldn't believe the testimony that occurred and how people really related to that library. And what I thought about during that whole process was the way I was able to create those type of results publicly. I had to do it by increasing revenue and controlling expenses and becoming more efficient. And I had to have my staff participate in that by giving them more authority and having them create efficiencies because of their closeness, if you will, to the activities that were occurring. And the one thing I wanted to do is complement the written testimony that the mayor put in on that bill to get the state to pay property tax to the city. I'm sorry, I don't recall where it sits right now. The other thing that I thought of too was private sector. I was involved in the carousel. I was a carver, believe it or not, but I also contributed money. And that was done by the private sector. And then the amphitheater, that was the private sector. I think there's a lot of opportunity with the private sector to do some of the things you want to have done. And have that not require any funding at all from the city. So what I would like to do is just look at what would happen if you had to do a little bit of everything and not cut anything down. What would you have to do that? And so in the bank, I didn't have the ability to say, I'm going to cut this, I'm going to cut this, I'm going to cut this. No, how am I going to do it? So that was the thought when I listened to the library. I can't imagine telling those people that the way they use the library, how can we do it? What are the elements that are necessary to do that? And you have some great people, by the way, with the city staff. Like I've watched Josh and some of the other people in the Revenue Task Force. Boy, that's organized well.
Thank you.
That's very well done.
Thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay. We are moving right along. Public hearing is now closed. Are there any questions from the committee? Mr. Dixon, please go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the CIP, I'm wondering if funding from Parks Capital Improvements could be redirected to offset any of the proposed reductions in seasonal and contracted services for parks maintenance. And that's about $700,000.
Are you asking a question or is that a motion?
I would like to know if funding from Parks Capital Improvements could be used to offset any of that general fund cut in seasonal and contracted services for parks maintenance.
Mr. Wardenhast, is that your area or is that Mr. CFO?
I will defer to the CFO.
Thank you.
Could you point me to what items you're looking at, Member Dixon?
What page?
Which projects would you like to?
There's a budget item reducing $700,000 for parks operations, seasonal.
Could you turn your microphone on, please?
Contracted services.
Oh,
for
can you
parks
turn
maintenance.
the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's going to be a fun night.
One of the proposed budget reductions is $700,000 from parks maintenance, and that's for seasonal and contracted services. And I'm wondering if any of the funding from Parks Capital Improvement could be used to offset those reductions.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So on page 18 of the CIP, you can look at all the funding going toward the parks, 13.3 million. Of that, $60,000 is general fund for the Salem Parks Improvement Fund. So it's a matching program that matches donations in the community for individual projects. But that's the only discretionary funding that could be allocated to parks operations, $60,000.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Member Dixon?
It did. Thank
Okay,
you.
perfect. Any other questions on the floor? Yes, Member Belichick, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Chair Brown. There's a couple questions in the written public testimony that I thought were pretty interesting and wondering if staff could address them. One is from Robert Downard about replacing traffic light intersections with roundabouts, and I'm a big fan of roundabouts. I think this would probably cost more money to do something, but can you tell us about any city plans for roundabouts as we grow into the future?
Yes, absolutely. Brian Martin, Public Works Director. We do like roundabouts. Roundabouts are efficient, they're effective, just like the testimony had mentioned. However, they're very hard to retrofit in an existing environment. Where roundabouts really are easier to construct is when new development is occurring and it's a large development and you have a lot of property that the developer owns and you actually have places to put the roundabout in. If you think about, even if you drive down South Commercial Street or through downtown, you just can't put a roundabout every place there's a traffic signal. You'd have to demolish buildings, buy right-of-way. It's just not very cost-effective. So where they are applicable, we certainly would look to do those over a traffic signal, but it has to be the right situation.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. And another one, if I may.
Please.
The other comment other commentary from Shirlene Gonzalez is about clarifying how, I think the funds that go to Livingston Park, if you understand that.
Yes, thank you. I was thinking about that earlier this afternoon when I saw the question. I think what happened in the CIP, and if I'm wrong, I'll ask Alan Dannon to come up and clarify, is a lot of that playground equipment got put into one project for economy of scale. When you do larger projects, you generally get a better price when you put that work out to bid. What we could do is separate them on the side and have some type of spreadsheet, or maybe provide some additional data that would just kind of track things separately without having to do it through a whole CIP or budget book process, was kind of the first thing I thought of as I saw that. So I think there's a way we can help share with the public how much is actually going to Livingston and the other parks. But as far as economy of scale, I do think it makes sense to keep it as one project.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer your question, Member Belichick? Okay. Member Geyer?
Yes, thank you. So I'm a member of the Ward 8 representative, and I was curious, are there any other park improvement projects for West Salem outside of Wallace?
I would have to, I got to take a look through the CIP real quick and check that out. And I think Alan Dannon's doing the same thing.
Okay, well, in the meantime, is there another question that we can get answered? Yes, Member Curtis?
Thank you. It's not really a question, but it's something that I was thinking about as I was reviewing all the projects and all the detail. The various town halls that the city's had on gun violence, I went to one, the first one, and I learned an awful lot at that meeting, and that gun violence is very concentrated in the northeast part of our community. And the area represents only 11% of our total city's square miles. So I tried to, take a look at, so I asked Josh and his staff for a breakout of the projects by ward. And then I kind of went through it and looked at, how much was being spent on parks in, Ward 5 and 6. And it's a big project. So, I don't know if there's any blatant discrepancy or lack of attention to that part of the city, but I would just, like to recommend to the council and future councils to think of this as a tool, that we can use to paint buildings or parks, or put facilities in this area, get youth involved. That was one of the main things I heard at those workshops, was that when youth come down and they create art and they paint and they clean up and they do those projects in their own neighborhoods, they get more pride. It's not going to fix gun violence, but it seems to me that this, all of our CIP projects, and I'm not privy to how they were rated or anything, but that I just would like to say that this could be a good tool for the city to really use this and focus on some of those projects that are going to help that area of the city, because we have that data.
And Member Curtis, Mr. Mayor's going to address your question or comment.
Okay.
I really appreciate your comments. I share all of them. And we recently, City Council recently changed our policy to actually consider equity in all of our, as we determine which projects should be prioritized. And that takes into account a lot of the census data. It takes poverty level or income level. It takes into consideration people with disabilities, people with no cars. Staff can go into more detail than I can about all of the different elements of that, but it takes into all of that census data, and we actually give an equity score that is one of the factors that's considered when we're deciding how to prioritize, because that's been my experience as well, is that sometimes wards 5 and 6 weren't given their due, and this is really helping to I think balance out those decisions better across the city. That's been my experience so far. It's a fairly new thing, so it's going to take some time to see those results.
Exactly. I mean, I think it will take time, and I realize that, our downtown parks are in Ward 1, and, Bush Park and the historic homes are in 2. And I mean, I understand that the airport's, in other wards, but it's good to hear, so I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Member Curtis. Mr. Director, please go ahead.
Yes, I do have an answer on that. There are 7 parks in the CIP in West Salem. There's also 2 transportation projects, 2 sanitary sewer projects, and 3 water projects.
Thank you.
Okay, and I saw another hand. Yes, Member Varney.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Member Curtis, for bringing that up about getting youth engaged. It got me started to thinking, and I was thinking about the Salem Park Improvement Fund monies that neighborhood associations can apply for projects in their parks in their neighborhood. I haven't brought this up with the Salem Parks Board, but I was just thinking, wouldn't it be nice if there was an element that could include our youth assisting with some of those projects or with putting them together or something? I think it's a good idea. Thanks.
Well said. Yes, Member Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions. The first is about Project 944 on page 49. So this is for parking structures and general fund. And the question I have is, from the CIP, what projects could get pushed? 1. And 2, I was noticing with the other parking-related projects, a lot of them are using the parking leasehold fund as opposed to the general fund. So why couldn't project number 944 use the parking leasehold fund?
Mr. CFO.
I can speak to part of that. So there's different ownership of different parkade structures. So the Civic Center parking structure that's directly underneath us, the Library Parkade, and Pringle Parkade are all general fund assets. So they're not part of the downtown parking like Chemeketa and Liberty. So they're not eligible for other funding. And as far as if it could get pushed out, I don't know if we have someone that could speak to that project specifically, but we can bring back information.
Yes, Member Cohen.
Another question not related to parking. It's about the airport funding. I saw the FAA was giving us close to, it's either 11 or 14 million over the next 5 years. Would any of that be jeopardized if the city does not move general fund to support the airport fund? I'm thinking in terms of matching.
Question on the floor.
Could you repeat that question? I'll try my best to answer that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yes.
So I'm really excited about the FAA bringing in lots of money to our city airport. I really think that's going to help out with our economy, with tourism, et cetera, et cetera. Would any of that funding be jeopardized if general fund no longer supported the airport fund? So I know we transferred 600 and change thousand last fiscal year, and we're going to propose to do the same this fiscal year. Would any of that funding be jeopardized?
I'm going to have to ask John Pascal to come up on the floor. I will tell you that if the general fund no longer supported the airport, we would not be able to support commercial air service. I don't think that would change, the work they want to do with the air traffic control tower and some of the other things. But John, go ahead and.
Hi, good evening. John Pascal, Airport Manager. Unlikely that it would be affected by whether or not the general fund supports the airport or not. The requirement for federal grant matches primarily is that we have to provide a matching source. So whether that's a state grant or a combination of state grants and airport operating funds, as long as we have that money, we can continue to accept FAA grants. The only change might be if there were no longer commercial air service at Salem, some of the CIP projects may either go away or be pushed out to future years to focus on kind of non-commercial airline projects.
A question back. So airport operation funds, if the general fund wouldn't support the airport fund, conceivably airport operations would, for commercial purposes, more likely than not cease to exist. Is that true?
I think the big picture is that federal grant funds are generally awarded to municipalities for exactly that reason. If the airport fund is unable to sustain itself, the municipality has the ability to generate funds from other resources, whereas in private industry, you can't do that. So the FAA would look at that as the city's responsibility to provide matching funds or to continue to make sure that its airport is solvent. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
So in other words, it's very important that we continue to support our airport.
It is, and of course, we want the airport to be financially self-sustainable so that we don't have to have external support.
Thank you.
Yep.
And we have another comment on the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Pascal, don't leave. My understanding is that the large amount of FAA dollars is coming in because we're getting a new tower, which is sort of unrelated to anything else happening at the airport. Like, they're kind of two independent things that are happening there. And the general fund really is what is allowing us to provide the commercial passenger air service, and it really is independent of that new air traffic control tower, right?
That's correct, Mayor. The FAA's funding for the new air traffic control tower is 100% federally funded through the bill law, the bipartisan infrastructure law. So there's no city matching fund requirement or any costs associated with that.
And that was planned before we started commercial passenger air service, that because of the nature of our airport, the use it gets, all of those sorts of things.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That would have happened either way.
Right. But just to be really clear, I want to underscore what Mr. Cohen said, and that's that if we don't support the airport currently, commercial passenger air service currently with general fund, then likely that would be in jeopardy. Isn't that true?
It is possible.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for the clarity. Additional questions on the floor? Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. John, you might explain how the airport, the future of supporting itself and what that might look like in the sense of what the general fund is helping it now, and that may be for another year or two until we can get it going. And you might explain that.
Correct. Yep. So for the most part, the general fund support that we're going to need until such time that the airport is self-sufficient through new revenues is to support the additional staff that were required for to accommodate commercial air service. So security staff, additional on-field staff, and airport operations. As air service grows, we generate new revenues, primarily in terms of parking, fuel flowage, landing fees, those types of revenue sources. Without any additional requirement to have expenses. So we have enough employees and enough infrastructure at this point where incremental revenue growth will just reduce that required financial support incrementally down. It could happen in a year, it could happen in 4 years. It really just depends on air service growth, but also new hangar developments and other developments that we're working through now that are independent of commercial air service. That's all airport revenue, and so it's not directly related to or because of commercial service, but it makes the airport fund self-sustainable.
Well said. There was another question on the floor. Yes, Member Belichick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Brown. As we talk about the importance of funding the commercial flights to the airport, so far we've been talking about it coming out of the general fund. Are there other sources of possible funding? I think 2 meetings ago it was brought up that perhaps the TOT could cover that. So I don't know.
Interesting question.
Those, but.
You want me to answer that?
CFO.
Mr. CFO, go for it.
I'm gonna try, and then I'll turn to our city attorney if he wants to add in. But the determination is that airport operations are not eligible for transient occupancy tax.
And while we're on this topic, because it sounds like, and Mr. City Attorney, you can come on up to the front. It sounds like now that we've kind of opened this door that there are going to be more questions to ask. Can we also take this from TOTS to pay for this? So this would be a good place to address that, Mr. City Attorney.
Keep in mind we're in a CIP public hearing.
Very true.
That's worth.
It's worth a lot.
Dan Atchison, City Attorney. So we can use TOT funds to promote Salem as a tourist destination. So in that sense, we can use TOT to promote the Fly Salem campaign. We cannot use TOT to fund operations or capital items at the airport. Because again, the airport is not a cultural facility, although there is a museum there, and that museum might be eligible for tot. And while it brings people in, it's not the destination most times when people are coming to Salem for tourism. They're not coming to the airport to view the airport. They're using it as a means of conveyance.
Well said. There's so many questions I want to ask, but I'm not. It's like finding a way to build a museum in the middle of the airport, right? Am I the only one that's thinking that?
It's the B-52 hangar. It's not ours.
Okay, good to know. And Member Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question to kind of highlight one other aspect in relation to the airport and what I think would be future capital improvement stuff. My question or comment is if staff could speak to the fact that by having commercial air service with the minimal number of trips, we qualify for future grants to maintain the infrastructure at the airport. Can someone verify that that's correct?
Yes, we will.
Better. Like, this is just give us an opportunity for the community to hear that again.
Yes, hi, John Pascal again, Airport Manager. It is correct. The FAA's minimum annual entitlement for airports increases once you exceed the 10,000 passenger enplanement level. We are already at over 3,000 for the first quarter of this year, so we'll exceed 10,000 this year. And that takes our minimum annual entitlement from $150,000 up to $1 million. So beginning in 2026, presuming that air service survives and thrives, we'll receive $1 million minimum. Also makes us more competitive for discretionary grant funding. The FAA is very focused on passenger service and cargo flying as they issue discretionary grants across the country. So commercial air service does directly impact the airport in a positive way through its grant program.
Oh, good to know. Thank you for sharing that. Wealth of information there. Member Phillips, did they answer your question, sir?
Excellent. Thank you for summarizing that.
Okay. Let's see. No. Oh, yes. Member Manville.
Yes. Hi. Thank you. First, briefly to Member Cohen's question about Project 944, the parking structure. When I heard the staff, I asked staff in a separate meeting about that. They said that the structural problems would increase significantly, so the costs would significantly increase if we deferred maintenance on that, possibly structural rebar problems and people being parked are having water damage to their cars and things like that. So that's a tiny bit of telephone game to that question, but I will defer to staff to fill in additional questions on deferring that. As a general question I had for staff, when we think about a 5-year roughly $500 million investment plan, are we looking at additional engagement opportunities beyond those that kind of traditionally privileged people engage in, such as town halls and going to websites and filing in reports and things like that, things like intercept surveys and paid interviews and engagement with people who traditionally don't come to meetings like this or engage in their neighborhood association or things like that? So,
who would like to answer that one?
I will start. We are looking for more ways to engage the community because the engagement hasn't always been great. And so one way is to getting out to all the neighborhood associations, and you're correct, they're not always well attended. We're trying to make the website more user-friendly so that people can go on and do things through the website. We're open to other ideas. You know, any suggestions we would certainly take and run with, but those are a few of the things that we're doing.
Thank you. Member Stapleton, please.
Thank you. I wanted to piggyback on this one. I have the privilege of serving on the Equity Roundtable commission. I don't know. I don't think it's really that formal, but staff have been really great about bringing projects to that group of folks, and then those folks are really connected to a really wide and varied diversity within our community, and they take that information to their folks. So it's really been a great opportunity to interact with our community in that way. But I am really interested in the ideas that you brought up, and I really hope that staff can look into that and see if we can't find some really unique ways to reach the communities that are underserved to get their feedback.
Well said. And I would second that. When we think about, this chamber and the people that are in it and those that are not here, I think there's a lot of value to make sure that information gets to everyone in our city. Because we can look around and we can tell that a lot of people just don't get the information, whether it's from multiple jobs or where they live. It's a conversation that I think we need to have. It's a courageous conversation because that conversation does involve demographics, right? It involves demographics, it involves socioeconomic status, it involves race, and so there's a lot of complex conversation that goes into that to make sure that we can find ways to make sure that every ward and every person in those wards can be seen and heard and appreciated, because that takes a lot of work. I'll be the first person to say it. It takes a lot of work, because when I look around this room, I don't see 100 African-American folk. Do you see them? That was a joke. Do you see them? No, you don't. You don't. And so there's a lot of work that we need to do. There's a lot of work. So thank you for sharing that, and Member Stapleton following up. Yes, Member Hoy.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few thoughts as I've been listening. One of them is just for clarification for everybody outside the room. CIP is buildings, not people, correct? It's actually building things, not paying people to maintain or service them.
CFO?
Yes, that is correct. They're only capital costs are allowed. I will say there is some costs that pay for some of the engineering support. So individual projects will pay for public works engineering, for example.
Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to hear that there are going to be some parks improvements in Northeast Salem. Is that right? In wards 5 and 6?
I'll have to pull out the book, but I'm sure there is. They're spread throughout the city.
And that's important to me because of where I live and because I care about the people who are living there. Last Friday night at the gun violence forum that happened at Chemeketa, which was held primarily in Spanish, which was wonderful, great practice for me. I heard overwhelmingly that just the folks that ask questions just aren't feeling safe. So in those parks in our area, not necessarily all of them, but some were mentioned specifically. And it just got me to thinking about if you have a building and you have a restroom or you have play structures and the restrooms can't be open because the parks are not safe, that's a problem. So I would love for us all to keep our eyes and ears open for funding to help the people in our area feel safer. We're in the highest violence vicinity out there right now, and it's a very unsettling feeling for a lot of folks. And those are real people with real concerns. Let's see, that was that. So I hope we can look out for that. Number 3 was consider wards 5 and 6. Number 4, to Member Dixon's question about could we use a certain fund for a certain thing. It reminded me of Councilor Gwynn's question about which buckets can trade or communicate or pass. Did you get an answer to that question?
I hope the answer is yes. So yeah, we provided some documentation. I'm happy to share it with the committee on restrictions by all 24 funds that we have, and then the couple that have, multiple cost centers, and then that broken down by cost center also.
So that's something we all could have a look at then?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yes, Member Curtis.
Thank you. I have just a quick, I will send it, I guess, Josh, they ran a report for me and a couple of us on all of these CIP projects by ward. So I actually jotted down that ward, Ward 5 has 9 parks projects for $11 million. Ward 6 is 5 projects for $10.5 million. But maybe I'll send that around to everybody, or no?
Well,
okay.
if it needs
or
to come
Josh will, yes, Josh, okay.
Because we can make a
yes, no.
a mistake if we start sending things to other members. CFO?
Yeah, absolutely. I know some of you took advantage of some pre-meeting briefing where we provided that information. I'm happy to send it to the whole group.
Okay.
Thank you. And I think everyone knows that. You have to be careful when you're sending information to so many members because by default, you're having a meeting without the rest of us. And so thank you, Mr. CFO. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Yes, Member Hoy.
Just to follow up to that, again, it's wonderful. I appreciate that, Member Curtis, to know that that progress is happening. I just really want us to figure out a way to maintain those projects so that people can enjoy them in those areas. So, thank you.
Okay. All righty. All right. Let's move along. May I have a motion recommending the proposed fiscal year 2025 through fiscal year 2029 capital improvements plan to the City Council for adoption?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Member Stapleton and a second by Member Gwynn. Is there any discussion? Yes, there's discussion. Question on the floor. Member Hoy.
Thank you. And I should have asked this, but my list was growing. I was curious about the $50,000, I can't remember what it was called. It was the minimum of $50,000. Can you explain that to me? And it's going to go to $100,000. What's happening? Does council see something or not at a certain point, or?
So the Council Finance Committee recommended to City Council a policy adjustment that would raise that bar from $50,000 to $100,000. That has not passed City Council. That is coming to them in July. So
great.
That will be up to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Member Manville.
Yeah, just a general comment that I'm hoping in future years we can move to a place where parking structures pay for themselves, using $350,000 out of the general fund to pay for a parking structure is a challenge, particularly because transportation is our leading form of climate pollution, which is costing the community in so many ways, and the earth in so many ways, the economy in so many ways. So I'm hoping that we can stop subsidizing driving through and have parking pay for itself in the future. That said, I totally understand that the structure needs help now, and that's a long-term goal rather than a short-term action.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Member Manville. Any other discussion for this? Yes, Member Stapleton.
Thank you, and thanks for bringing that up. At some of our town halls, a really popular part of revenue is about user fees, right? And the folks who are using the different things to be paying for those things that they're using, and parking would be one of those things. So I couldn't agree more with you on that one. I just wanted to take a moment to thank staff for the special meetings that we had beforehand that were offered to everybody. I know not everybody took them up on that, but they were really, really helpful. For anybody who knows me, the CIP is my jam. I love that thing. And so it was great to just have that extra time and attention to ask the questions that we had to really dive into it. And staff did also a great job, James, today with that presentation for the community to understand how the CIP works. It's the largest amount of capital improvement money that goes out the door, and those are things that we see, touch, feel, and experience in our community, so they're very, very important. So really thankful for that. Also, over the years, I've asked for the pie charts that you now see in the CIP. This is the first year we have those, and I couldn't be more pleased with those, and really breaking it out and how much money is going towards pedestrian projects and bike projects and traditional transportation, et cetera. So that has been really, really helpful, and I know that it was a lot of work, so I wanted to thank staff for that. It is really helpful for me. Thank you.
And who doesn't love a good pie chart, right? Exactly. But in all seriousness, we do appreciate the staff. We recognize that there's so much that you do. Today is Wednesday, so staff, you're here tonight. We saw a lot of you last night, and the night before that, it was a city council meeting, and tomorrow night there's something else. So thank you, staff. We're just working around the clock. We appreciate all that you do, so we don't want to take you for granted. Member Phillips, yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleagues, and I'll be redundant. Thank you, staff. I really appreciated the small group breakout sessions. I believe at least 4 were offered. They're incredibly high value, and it kind of spares some time in tonight's meeting. I just want to state for the record, I support this this motion that we're discussing. I mean, there's a lot to look forward to in the CIP. I appreciate that Award 3 project was kind of the example project for the slideshow, both for the small group and tonight. I know that the Morningside neighborhood will be thrilled that that intersection at Commercial, where Vista and Ratcliffe are, is coming, and we have funding identified, so that will become a real project in our future. There are numerous other things coming to Ward 3 and across all of Salem that I'm really enthusiastic about. And I also want to state that I too heard from staff that the general fund, that is the only source of funding that we can use to fix the one parkade to the tune of $300,000. There is a timeliness issue, and if we don't address it soon, that cost will increase exponentially. So I think we're all hyper focused on the general fund, but if we don't act now, the cost will be so much more in future. So I'm prepared to support this wholeheartedly, and I really appreciate staff and all of my colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Phillips. Any more discussion on this? Yes, Member Varney.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a remark about the addition this year in the on page 7. It describes how the scoring is done for the various projects. So it lists the criteria and how they're weighted, and the fact that it lists the different criteria under parks, under transportation, under utility scoring. I believe that's something new that was added this year, and I just wanted to say I appreciate it, because I think a lot of times we wonder, well, why is this included in the list, or why is this one not? And so that really helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Varney, for stating that. Yes, I agree. Any more discussion on the CIP on the floor? Okay. All those in favor of accepting the motion to recommend fiscal year 2025 through fiscal year 2029 capital improvement plan to the City Council for adoption, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Moving on now to number 7, special order of business. Item 7 on the agenda, we will pick up where we left off last week, because we were having so much fun. We already have our budget manager, Ms. Callie Lanenbach is here. She's going to share with us the Natural Environment Stewardship Result Area, the Urban Renewal Agency proposed budget, and the Strong and Diverse Economy Result Area. Due to the link between the Urban Renewal Agency budget and the Strong and Diverse Economy Result Area budget, questions for both of those, we're going to take those at the conclusion of the Strong and Diverse Economy presentation. That way, she'll have the opportunity to finish, and then afterwards, we'll come back with some questions, make sure we don't interrupt her flow. And after all these presentations, we will have the CFO come back to us, and he will present the safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure result area. Take it away.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, Budget Committee members. I'm Callie Lanenbach, the Budget Manager, and I'm happy to share with you this evening about the Natural Environment Stewardship Result Area. So programs in this result area are managed by Public Works, and they focus on environmental compliance, monitoring, and education. This result area begins on page 89 of the city budget, which is the large book that you received. So this result area has just over $26.3 million in proposed funding, with 4 major program groupings that represent responsible wastewater treatment, careful natural resource management, water quality monitoring, compliance with federal and state permits, and work toward climate action goals. There are just over 105 full-time equivalent positions that provide services related to this result area. I think I skipped. No, I did right. So workforce changes in this area. The utility fund is proposing adding 2 new positions, 1 part-time limited duration position and 1 full-time position. The limited duration position would work during the spring and summer months to transport biosolids, and the full-time permanent position, the Department Tech Support Analyst 2, would be working to support the distributed control system programming as well as finding efficiencies and automations. The proposed 25 budget includes funds for improvement at the River Road Wet Weather Treatment Facility to replace the ultraviolet bank B lights to improve the facility's reliability and performance. There are also a few GIS system updates, including a network conversion to migrate data from an older geometric standard to the utility network standard. Another enhancement for GIS is enabling 3D GIS, so imagery and light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, data sets can be used to create three-dimensional representation of the city. Accomplishments include a grant award from Portland General Electric through the Department of Environmental Quality's Oregon Clean Fuels Program to purchase an electric battery-powered compact street sweeper, and that is expected to be in service this summer. Additionally, 12,270 trees and 28,120 shrubs were planted through city-sponsored programs in the rights-of-way, parks, natural areas, and by streams. The stream crew in the summer of 23 inspected 59.7 miles of streams and creeks, removed just over 1,900 cubic yards of green waste, and about 21 tons of trash. This is the highest amount removed since 2007 and twice as much since the summer of 2002. So a lot of good work there. And now we are available to answer any questions you might have on this result area.
Members? Yes, Member Cohen.
That's a lot of trash. Do you know where it's coming from?
Is that a personal question you're asking the budget manager, or?
I partly kind of know the answer. The Clean Streams Initiative, his name's Luke, forget his last name, came and did a presentation, and he said that a lot of the trash is due to the homeless folks that live near the waterways, and stuff gets swept down the streams. So it was partly I knew the answer, and partly the question will then come, what are we going to do to mitigate the amount of trash that goes into our waterways?
That's a great question. And Manager Callie, I'm not sure if you were ready to answer our garbage problem.
I do not think I'm the appropriate person to answer this question. I would defer to someone in Public Works who might have more expertise in this area.
I would second that. Public Works.
Anyone.
Are you ready?
Yes, Brian Martin again, Public Works Director. I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, as far as the homelessness issues in our city, it's a much bigger issue than just a Public Works. How do we keep the trash out of the streams? I mean, when you think about, well, should we fence the streams off or try and keep people out? And all of a sudden you create floodplain issues because if you back up stormwater flows, you can cause flooding in homes and to other city facilities. So there's no answer like, yeah, we'll just fence it off and keep the trash out. So this is a bigger issue than Public Works, and this is really a citywide thing we'll have to deal with.
It is, and I would agree with you. And I think, was it said last week, and I think maybe the CFO said it, that the county does help us when it comes to a lot of our garbage. Is that correct? Did I hear that, or am I hearing things?
I don't believe I said it, but I believe it's true for the SOS
Okay,
team.
great then.
The trash they collect, they take it to Covanta and dispose of it for free. Is that true of the stream crews also? Up to a cap. Up to a cap also for the stream crews.
Got it. I mean, and it's a good question. It's a hard question to answer because it's not just, just us trying to figure out where it goes. There's a lot of other stakeholders that are involved with that. So it seemed like someone, Member Hoy?
Thank you, and this is not a question for you, Callie. It's a remark to Member Cohen's statement that yesterday morning I was under the Truett property on the riverfront checking out stuff and letting folks know that they're going to need to move along with Officers Bennett and Ramirez. And the amount of trash, it's nothing like Wallace Marine Park, but it is very bad. And it was striking to see that the amount of debris that is right on the water's edge, and that's obviously been, during higher water moments, flowing downstream because it's hung up in the trees. And just last night, we passed we agreed to pursue a grant to study the tributaries from the Willamette and how the fish are making their way into those streams or not. And this morning I just woke up and I thought, wow, I want the fish to get through, but where have they been on their way there? And what are they living in? And what are they swimming in? And then what's happening when we eat them? Just my thought, and thanks for bringing it up. It is a real big issue, and I'm shocked that in a state that cares so much about our natural resources that we are not doing more to try to take care of those trash situations that are really going into our waterways.
Any other, Member Manville, was there something you wanted to share? Nope, you sure? Part of my job is reading minds, so. Member Allen, yes.
Thank you. We're hyper-focused on the general fund for obvious reasons. With regards to most of what's going on in the natural environment stewardship area, the costs I don't want to say are merely, but they are passed off on water and sewer rates. So my question probably for the director is, what are the checks and balances? What is done to try and ensure what's the pushback against expenditure in order to try and keep rate increases as low as that can be? I can restate the question perhaps more articulately if you need me to.
I mean, we're always looking for ways to improve our processes and become more efficient and, look at artificial intelligence technologies. So we're always looking for ways to make our business more cost effective. Are you kind of referring this back to the issue with the streams and the trash?
No. I'm in general. I'm looking. Are there efficiency measures at which you target? Are there benchmarking against other municipalities? What is the general fund has a pushback because there's limited resources, and when it's done, it's done. That's not the case in public works because you can increase water and sewer rates. So I'm just wondering what is done. What is the counterbalance to rate increases to ensure that we're getting the most effective and efficient operation?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking to other agencies, and how they do their work and how we can do our work. We're partners with many agencies, in the Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. I can't point to, and Alicia Blaylock's behind me here and help work on the performance measures. I can't point to a performance measure and say, yeah, we measured this against Eugene or we used this against Gresham. But, we're always looking for ways to improve our systems, and automation is one of those ways. We also have an aging system, and so we have water lines that are over 100 years old in downtown Salem. I mean, there's infrastructure needs that no matter what we do, those are not going to go away, and that drives a big part of our business model. When we have issues like the algotoxin issue that happened up in Detroit, we have to find ways to treat that issue. And, we went through a significant process of trying to find what the best process was. It turned out to be ozone. Ozone, it adds cost to our system, but it's something that we have to do to make sure our water remains potable and drinkable and maintains the high level of service that we have for our community. So I think there are things we can do better, and that'll be, I will look into that, and I will get with our staff and our team, after this meeting and double check, and maybe we can provide some more information for you at the next meeting, but that's the best I can share tonight.
And Member Allen, we have Mr. Mayor and the city manager. They're going to speak to that.
And I would just say the other part of that is that Public Works doesn't actually raise the rates. It's the city council who does that. And so part of our job is that checks and balance and to push back and to make sure the staff's doing everything they can and that we're considering all of those factors when we make that decision. I can tell you that probably the two least favorite things we do on city council is consider garbage rate increases and water sewer rate increases. Those are very painful and we do not take those lightly ever. So I would say it's kind of, we kind of have a two-pronged system, and the council is the one who actually makes that ultimate decision. So.
Thank you, Chair Brown. Brian, if you could just very briefly walk us through the rate-setting process.
Yes, absolutely. So we're getting ready to start that process here. In fact, we're looking to schedule our first meeting in May. We have what's called a Water Wastewater Task Force, and on it we have, I believe, 4 council members. We have business members from our community. We have citizens at large. We have representatives that we sell water to, such as the City of Turner. We include the City of Kaiser. So we have a very large group of not just city people looking at how we're doing our business, but we have council on that committee, business leaders, and other elected officials in the community. And so as we look at what our costs are, we put together what's called a cost of service analysis. And that cost of service analysis looks at what does it cost us to treat water? What does it cost us to treat wastewater? What are the operational needs? What are the infrastructure needs? And so that whole model then looks at what the needs are so that we can really adjust rates as needed to meet that model. I mean, typically, there's always an increase, just like inflation goes up and the cost of all city services go up. I think there's 1 or 2 years since I've been here at the city where it was held flat, which that then generally resulted in a larger increase when it came time to do it again. So we are looking at all of those things as far as getting into the nuts and bolts about, how we clean manholes, how we clean detention basins. I think that's an area where we could do more analysis to see how we compare with others and look at some of that performance tracking.
And Member Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding trends, Mr. Martin, I remember, I think it was 2015, I was on this budget committee, and I remembered something from that conversation. It still haunts me. No, just kidding. But the efforts that we've taken over the last 10, 20, 30 years to ask people to use less water was actually causing people to use less water. And so the less, and since we're making, it's based on usage, sort of the revenue. I remember back then, I think our efforts had been working to the point where growing up, if you were the only yard that wasn't taken care of or if watered, you're looked at bad. Now I look at some of my neighbors that watered a lot and I'm looking at them with the side eye, So trend-wise, has there been any difference? I mean, what are we looking at? Because that's the other side of it is how much people actually use.
Yeah, I can, and I don't have the number specifically, but about 2008, 2010, we were looking at replacing some of our transmission mains, which for everybody here, our water treatment plant is out at Guerin Island, which is east of Staten. And so we have 2 large transmission mains that transmit that water from Staten up into the city of Turner and then to the city of Salem. And we were actually looking at having to upsize those pipes because our demand forecast was showing significant increases. What happened is part of that initiative to try and conserve water, people actually did back down, and some of the businesses changed. But I believe where we're at now in our peak summer day, the demand is about 49 million gallons of water per day. That's probably not too far off from where we were back in 2015. But if you'd have looked at the chart at that time, I'm sure we would have been in the 50 to 60 million gallons of water per day, based on those projections back then. So there definitely has been a drop, but we are seeing the trend. It is picking up just because we're growing and, there's more water usage.
Any other follow? Yes, Member Stapleton.
Thank you. Hi. I love that our mini street sweeper is in here. I was hoping for a picture, but I don't see one. I'm thrilled about this, not only because it will do park paths, which sometimes can get a lot of debris on them, but also it is specifically made for bike lanes. And will give us the capacity and ability to do protected bike lanes, which we can't currently do right now because our street sweepers are too big and they can't get in there. So really excited about this. I would love to know if we are going to move forward with a naming competition for our mini street sweeper. And if so, when would we look forward to that in our community?
It has arrived. I heard that, no. I was told no. Okay, someone told me he was going to be here this week, so if Mark said no, it has not arrived. We still have time to name it. Okay. So we can embark on that at any point. So we'll look at doing that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Any additional questions? Member Phillips. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff again. Couple of kind of question comments. One, I've served on the wastewater committee that makes recommendations to the city council at large for setting our rates. It's a rigorous process. In addition to the 4 city councilors and citizens at large and other stakeholders, I believe County Commissioner Kevin Cameron was there, and we get a consensus recommendation from them that's to be as efficient as possible, but to keep us financially solvent so that we can maintain good ratings for loans and so forth. And it's nice to come together and look at that and make improvements and keep our water safe for everybody. To that end, getting to my next points, I really appreciate how proactive staff have been in terms of not just looking at the issues we've already had, like the cyanoalgotoxins that we had back a few years ago, but also future threats such as the forever chemicals that are really an issue even more so in other parts of the country that are older or have had an industrial history. Our drinking water is safe. The tests that we've done, we're just so fortunate to get water from a pristine watershed, and I appreciate staff offering council the opportunity to go out on tours of our Garrett Island facilities and other facilities so that we can confidently, as best our ability to communicate to the community, tell people that the water is safe to drink. We've got great water. There's a nominal increase in cost because we do have the ozone treatment, but that just is such a good thing to have given our climate disruption that we're staring down now and into the future. In terms of additional things that haven't yet come up, like we've got a little bit in the works for the forever chemicals. I see a lot in the news about microplastics, and we've talked a bit about trash just now in this discussion. Is there anything in terms of like microplastics in our water, and does that overlap at all with those forever chemicals? And I have more questions, but this is just a starting off point.
Oh, we know we have more. Yes, question on the floor.
So we kind of look at forever chemicals as being part of the same as microplastics, kind of in that same category. To my knowledge, we have not started testing for microplastics yet, though. We do have, so Dwayne Barnes is here, he's shaking his head no. So I don't think we've begun testing for microplastics. We really have focused on the regulated contaminants and the list of unregulated contaminants and are following those federal guidelines for testing. But I'm hearing the same thing, and I'm sure it's something we'll be looking at here in the near future.
Hey, and just to follow up, Member Phillips, I want to follow up that. So with microplastics, that's something that the council will determine to talk about in the future, or will your department come back and say, hey, we're doing a study on microplastic? Like, who does that? Like, who?
Yeah, it could happen a couple of ways. I mean, I would look for our staff to look at how we would go forward and test those things, but the council could also direct us and say, hey, we want you to look into this.
Got it. Member Phillips, I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
No, thank you. I just want to say that what I heard is that's a confirmation of where we're at, but I appreciate that staff is aware of these concepts. And I wanted to make sure I wasn't totally off base to say that there's some overlap between the forever chemicals and microplastics, but there are some unique properties that they're different. So I don't feel like I'm off base, and I'm encouraged to hear that staff are looking at this proactively. I feel like we're out ahead in a lot of these issues. That being said, what I've seen in the news as a science, as a lay person who's got a strong science background, is that microplastics come from just plastics, and there's so much of our modern technology and how things get around through the supply chain has to do with our ability to create plastics. But I just get so uncomfortable when I feel like unintentionally, I don't think it's intentional, but unintentionally, that they're sort of like, well, homeless people are responsible for trash. And while I have toured parks with our mayor and other colleagues on city council that have been devastated by unmanaged community members who are experiencing homelessness, that's not where most trash comes from. In particular cases in our parks, yeah, it's terrible, like what's happened, but that's because we have a lack of management and resources going to manage homelessness. But the majority of plastics just come from the supply chain. I believe there is a major article that's in the news right now that's starting to quantify like where these things are coming from. So you can look at which corporations are making the most plastics. I think Coca-Cola was like #1. I don't say that to pick on Coca-Cola, maybe a little, but like the state and in Oregon and other municipalities are looking at ways to reduce the amount of plastics that are going. You can pass rules and laws to force people not to manufacture those giant containers. And when you have less plastics in the supply chain, you have less trash in the waterways. So I just want to make sure we're focused on orders of magnitude and where the source of the problem is coming from. I don't know if staff has any comments on that, but I believe Oregon has passed a few rules to try and get at that issue.
Thank you, Member Phillips. We do have, not staff, but we have Member Stapleton. She would like to comment on that.
Yes, thank you. I would love to have Ryan come on down. I've been serving as chair of the Solid Waste Committee, and we've been talking about this a lot. So thanks, Councilor Phillips, for bringing this up. It's a really important point.
Let's see, where do I start?
What's your name?
My name is Ryan Zink. I am part of the budget office, but also one of my hats is the franchise administrator. And so as part of that, I'm also liaison to our Solid Waste Committee, subcommittee of the City Council. So there are some things in the works right now at a state level. In 2022, I believe it was, Oregon legislation passed what's called the Oregon Recycling Modernization Act. We call it RMA for short. There's lots of acronyms with this, but I'll try to avoid those. One of the aspects of that, and I guess there's multiple aspects, but it's a producer responsibility model where essentially we're pushing the responsibility of managing and pushing that responsibility of creating more recoverable materials back to the producers. So it's pushing that to the producers. And so the primary elements of that are going into effect July 1st of 2025. I could spend hours explaining and going into that tonight, but I won't. So there is work that direction, but it's going to be a long process, I think, before we see big movements in that, but there are movements happening.
Thank you. Thank you. And just to mentioning on, since we're talking about trash, looks like we're maybe, anyway, that could be a long conversation. One thing that I do know about trash is that, take for instance like Wallace Park, there's quite a bit of debris in that park. And I didn't know this, and so I'm just going to tell you where I got it from. I didn't know this, but this came from a police officer because I was actually with him on a ride-along, and I didn't know this. And so we were in Wallace Park, and he said to me, he said, "Dr. Brown, do you see that iron that's over there?" And true enough, there was an iron. And then he said, "What else do you see?" I looked around, I saw a handsaw. I saw a lot of things that you would not traditionally find in a park are where our unsheltered live. And he said this to me. He said, do you know where all those things came from? And I said, no, by all means, tell me. He said, this comes from people in our community that's trying to help the homeless. And so whereby the intentions of someone that has a lot of things in their home that they want to give to someone that's homeless, what ends up happening, it stays in our waterways, it stays on the banks, it stays there. And so some of what I learned, and which I'm going to share with everyone here in the room that's listening, is that there are so many ways that we can help our unsheltered population. And one of the ways that I found out that we probably need to stay away from is giving them a lot of household items because they don't have a home. And so when you think about some of the products, there may be a good in gesture, but in essence, we're just making the problem even larger. Does it make sense? It was eye-opening to me because I could have done like, hey, I'm gonna go take this, right? I'm gonna clean up my garage, I'm gonna take it to the homeless. Well, the homeless don't need everything out of Urban's garage, right? I need to find a different way to get rid of my mess rather than, see where I'm going with this? And so it's a great conversation to have, and I just think we have to be able to peel back all the layers as to how we got to where we are, whether we're talking about the homeless or we're talking about the trash, you name it. I think it's a conversation worthy of having. So, moving right along, Mr. CFO, Budget Manager Callie, are you done?
If there are no further questions, I have one other result area to review.
Okay.
Sorry for clogging up here.
It's okay. I think I'm still organized here. We're good.
I want to say that so bad. And what I would like to do, Budget Manager, so when you're done, the CFO, I think he's going to follow, right? And then we'll pick up where we left off from last week. Perfect. Thank you.
There we go. So the second result area I'm going to review is the strong and diverse economy result area, which also includes the Urban Renewal Agency budget. So these programs support economic development and the URA. So like I said, this area consists of both city funds and urban renewal agency funds. The city funds make up about $15.4 million, and the main contributors to this result area are urban development, parking services, the cultural and tourism promotion, and the airport. This program information starts on page 159 of the city budget, and there are about 34 full-time equivalent positions that contribute to this result area. So Salem's Urban Renewal Agency is a distinct corporation with the mayor and city council serving as its board of directors and the city manager as its executive director. City staff, primarily in the urban development division, support the URA through an intergovernmental agreement with the city. And the purpose of the URA is to spur redevelopment in areas that might not otherwise occur without public investment. So on this slide, there's a map of the urban renewal areas, and from north to south, they're North Gateway, which is the largest at 926 acres, Riverfront Downtown, the oldest, which was formed in 1975, West Salem, South Waterfront, which includes a portion of Minto Island, McGill Crest, where improvements to McGill Crest Street are underway, Fairview, which is no longer collecting tax increment, and Mill Creek Industrial Park. Did I say Jory? No, I forgot Jory. Jory is the smallest and the newest. It was established in 2020. So there are four funds that make up the URA budget. The first is the Tax Allocation Bond Fund, or the Debt Service Fund, and that begins on page 13 of the URA budget. This includes property tax increment revenues that are collected in the urban renewal areas and the expenses of borrowing. The expenditure budget for this fund is $20 million. Next is the Tax Allocation Improvement Fund, or Capital Improvements Fund, and this begins on page 23. This fund receives the proceeds from borrowing in the Debt Service Fund, and it pays for construction and improvement projects in the urban renewal areas. So the total expenditure budget proposed for 25 is $59.3 million. And details about the projects in each urban renewal area are included under the capital improvements tab of the URA budget. The expense budget for this fund saw a sharp decline this year as compared with last year, and that was to align budget authority more closely with historical actuals and anticipated expenditures. The next fund is the Salem Convention Center Fund, and this is where operational revenues and expenses for the Salem Convention Center are accounted for. This begins on page 57. Revenues are derived from food sales and rentals from events or activities held at the convention center, and the proposed budget is $6.8 million. And when the convention center opened, the URA established a gain-loss reserve to cover operating shortfalls or to fund repairs or major improvement projects at the convention center. A combination of transient occupancy tax funds and income from the convention center filled this reserve with a $4 million goal. A working capital for fiscal year 25 is estimated at over $4 million as activity in the convention center has remained high this year. The proposed budget for this fund is $1.4 million. Most of the work within this result area continues services traditionally provided like airport operation, transient occupancy tax funded programs, and economic development activities. One highlight is that commercial flights at the Salem Airport began in October of last year. As of the end of March, 214 commercial flights have occurred to and from Salem, carrying over 23,000 passengers. The airline will begin one new route in May to Sonoma County. In June, another round-trip flight to Burbank will be added, making 7 weekly round-trip flights to all destinations. Many of the projects listed on this slide and included in this result area are large and take several years to fund and complete. Some of those projects include multiple phases of streetscape improvements downtown, which will update the look and feel of the downtown streets. Also included is funding for McGillcrest corridor improvements. A combination of federal funds, system development charges, bond funds, and URA tax increment will make this project possible. This is a very large project and is scheduled for completion in 2028. Design and installation of a left turn lane from Silverton Road onto 17th Street is fully funded and is scheduled for completion in 2026. This project should improve traffic flow and increase safety at the intersection. And then the final item on this slide is Marion Parkade improvements. There was a study performed to evaluate long-term repair and maintenance needs, and about $3.3 million is allocated in the budget to begin implementations of the recommendations of that study. And with that, staff is available to answer any questions you have on this result area.
Budget Manager, real quick, that study you just mentioned, where is that?
So that will be located in the Riverfront Downtown URA budget, and it'll be in the capital improvement section of that budget. I can get the page if it's helpful.
I was just curious. Thank you. The floor is open. Members, any questions? On the floor, Member Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering if the city has ever done a study to assess the impact that its urban renewal program has on the overall financial health of city government and or on the overall economy.
Great question.
Of the city. In other words, is the urban renewal program moving the needle in one direction or the other for city government and for the local economy versus what would happen without it?
Great question. Who would like to take?
I see Kristen coming up.
Good evening, Kristen Rutherford, Director of Community Planning and Development. We have not conducted that type of study. Doing a study like that becomes extremely complex because it's very difficult to compare apples to apples. So when you're looking at the growth of assessed valuation within an urban renewal area, you are, by definition, an urban renewal area, when it's created, has to meet blight findings. So you're looking at certain types of investments and infrastructure investments, right? And so then when you compare that to growth of assessed valuation elsewhere in the city, and you're looking at maybe greenfield development, new housing development where there was nothing there, you're going to have a very dramatic growth in assessed valuation where you're going from nothing to something, compared to within an urban renewal area where you've got something and that something isn't at its highest and best use, and you are trying to incentivize change and growth within that area. So I think studies like that can be done, but it would be very, very costly because what you would really want to do is look at an urban renewal area, and then you'd want to look more closely to the areas most adjacent to that urban renewal area, and then track over time growth of assessed value and where you've had investment and have been issuing permits. So because of just the cost factor and how staff intensive something like that would be, we have not done that. But we do have data, that can show just within urban renewal areas how growth has occurred over time.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, Member Dixon?
It occurs to me that urban renewal in Salem is now in its 50th year. So it started in '75. We're now in year 50. So it seems like a program that's been going on that long might be due for a serious look. That's the basis of my inquiry. And I appreciate Director Rutherford's comments. So thank you.
And I think it'd be worthy, it's a great conversation to have, especially, the history of urban renewal. And I'm not advocating that we go out and spend six figures on a new study. I'm not advocating for that. But I think there's value there, because if we want to share our story or tell our story to every person that lives in Salem and all the 8 wards, I think there's value. I think there's value to know how we came to have urban renewal projects, not just here in this city, but just countrywide, because let's just say there's a lot of history when it comes to using that terminology of urban renewal. And if you don't know that history, then I encourage you to just Google and you'll find it. There's plenty of it there. Any additional questions on the floor? Yes, Member Manville, and then Member Allen.
Thank you, Chair Brown. I was wondering if the city had any policies or standards about what sort of employers we try to attract here. For example, attracting one of the most anti-union mega corporations, Amazon. As someone who's involved in organized labor, it's deeply concerning if we're investing a lot of resources drawing those sorts of companies here. So I was wondering if there are any sorts of policies that the city has or screens that we have when we think about who we might be trying to attract to the city.
Director Rutherford.
Sorry, I'm going to try to not drop my documents here. No, we don't have that kind of a policy. When it comes to something like an Amazon and locating in Mill Creek, so I will say that that's not, we were not out and actively recruiting Amazon to come to Salem, right? So a project like Amazon comes to us through the state of Oregon, who then reaches out to local jurisdictions looking at land availability. And we happen to have land that, out at Mill Creek, that was for the most part shovel ready and available. And the landowner was the state of Oregon, and they sold it to a private developer who had a lease with Amazon. So in that kind of a situation, we're not providing any sort of direct like urban renewal grant or anything to Amazon. They are benefiting from the enterprise zone tax exemption program, which again is a geographic boundary. And again, if you meet the qualifications, it's applicant neutral. So there's no sort of social justice test, no employment factor test, or anything like that associated with that program under state statute.
Member Allen?
Yeah, my question involves the community planning and development, the $4.4 million, and it says that it's coming from the general fund. We didn't talk, the presentation didn't talk much about community planning and development. It would have been my expectation that most of community development would be paid for through development fees, permits, that sort of thing, as opposed to general fund. So can you help me connect those dots?
Yes, so community planning and development is the new name for a merged organization that consists of what was the Urban Development Department, what was the Community Development Department, and a part of what was in the Public Works Department that handled development infrastructure, and the Housing Authority. Okay. So the general fund component then would be services like code enforcement, parking enforcement, their planners, and planners, portion of those expenses are through permit revenues. But as we've had a decrease in permits over the last year, as folks are just waiting on the sidelines due to high interest rates, those permit fees have dropped significantly, and so we're more dependent on the general fund this year.
Good question. Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Ms. Rutherford, would you explain how the cost, some permits, and so sign permits and other permits are working at converting to be cost, let's see, I think it's cost recovery, I think is the term that's being used, because permit fees, I know for sign permit fees, there hadn't been an increase for a while, and so there was a big jump. I got emails about that, and then it was explained to me that the fees had gone up, and what you're trying to do now is get cost recovery so that funds are not being removed from the general fund to support somebody getting a permit for a sign. Would you explain that?
Yes, absolutely. So we have many fees that have not been on a set increase schedule. We've gone through some processes, a few years ago in the planning department to recalibrate fees and try to associate them with the costs that we incur so that we can achieve cost recovery and become less general fund dependent. So within the broader planning umbrella of fees, then the sign fees are another category that we've been examining. We're doing the same thing with some of our parking fees. We're doing it with residential permits and the daily residential permits for guests. So we have a number of fees that haven't been increased for a very, very long time. So it's well over a decade. There's been no increase. So as we are looking at these and then approaching it from a cost of service model, we're trying to phase in those increases so it's not a big hit all at once, depending on the type of fee. Others, we're moving to that next step directly, and that does result in a substantial increase in the fee, but that's because nothing has changed for a very long time.
Thank you. I do just want to say that what the goal has been is to not subsidize with general funds fees and permits.
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
Thank you, Director. Any other following questions? Member Stapleton?
If I had a motion, when would the staff like to hear that on this item?
Was that a question for me? Would the staff like to hear it?
When would the staff like
when?
to?
Oh,
Yes.
when? Okay.
Not today.
Yeah, not tonight. Maybe next week. No, I'm joking.
On this result area?
Yes, please.
Yeah, anytime.
Anytime?
Yeah.
Chair?
By all means, Member Stapleton, go ahead.
All right. I move to direct staff to move up to $75,000 from the Business Retention and Recruitment / SEDCOR line item to our Parks Department to fund movies in the park, kids relays, and other community events.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and there's a second.
Thank you.
Open for discussion.
Can I speak to my motion?
Yes, ma'am, you can.
Thank you, sir. So this is on page number 166. It's a second line item down. And this is a line item, it's over $200,000. And this is a membership that the city holds with SEDCOR. And it's an annual membership. It is renewed in July. And $75,000 of that comes from the general fund, while $125,000 of that comes from the URA. And the reason why I am bringing this forward is that I feel like there's an opportunity here to not only support local businesses, but also to meet a community need. When I talk with the community members and business owners downtown in Ward 1 and Ward 2, so many of them talk to me about what happens to their businesses when we have community events downtown, and that is that their business increases. There is a lot more foot traffic downtown. There is just a lot more folks who are interested in going out to eat after the event or going out for ice cream or whatnot. And so they're really, they're not excited about losing that opportunity throughout the summer. And of course, you all, as well as me, are hearing from our community members, and they're really heartbroken that they're going to miss out on this opportunity. You know, we heard Member Cohen here talking earlier about just really feeling the effects on our personal families and our opportunity as a community to gather together. For those of you who know me, community is a huge thing to me. And so, especially during this time, I feel like when we have so much strain on us as a community, to not continue to get together and be together in person, that can really be detrimental to community and the opportunities to interact together. And so I really want to try to protect that. This is a short-term fix. I support business development in the way that we've been doing it in the past. It seems like we do have some opportunities to always do things better. Thank you, Member Manville, for bringing that up. But of course, I want to continue that in the future. So while we are sorting out our revenue issues and trying to figure out new ideas, I feel like this might be a really good opportunity for us to not only meet the needs of our small local businesses and retaining those businesses, especially in our downtown core, but also keeping that community involvement for our families and visitors alike. There are a couple of things that I would love to include in this with staff, is that we use this as an opportunity to communicate with our community. We have those nights at the movie in the park. I would love to see that, 20 minutes before the movie to be showing upcoming events for the city, to use it as an opportunity to communicate what's happening with our revenue issues. And then to even give people an opportunity to donate so that we can continue this really great program, whether that's a QR code on the screen that folks who are able to give can give, I think is a really good opportunity for us to really have some ownership in funding the things that we love. So that is my proposal. Thank you.
And Member Stapleton, just for clarity, tell us again what fund that's coming out of again?
Yeah, so it's on page 166 of the big book. It's the second line item down, and it says Business Retention and Recruitment with a / SEDCOR. It's for $200,400.
And the motion says 75K, is that what you were suggesting?
Yes, $75,000 is what the general fund pays for that. The remaining $125,000 comes from the URA.
Okay, so we're going to open, is there any more speaking to that before we go into questions and comments? Director Rutherford, please.
Yes, just for a point of clarification, that what you're referring to is $75,000 of general fund.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, another comment.
Thank you. I actually have a question of staff. Well, I guess a question and a comment. I love the goal of your motion. I do. But I want to understand the impact of your motion. So Kristen, can you help us understand what this would mean, what the ramifications of that decision would be?
Sure.
Yes, please.
So this is a contract for services with SEDCOR for business recruitment and retention. And under that contract, they do business recruitment activities, for example, like the Amazon one, where something comes through the state. And they come through with a request for information, asking a lot of different questions about properties that we have available, what the workforce is like, what utilities are like, all of these things. So SEDCOR prepares in response to those requests. They work with our existing businesses that may be outgrowing space or wanting to add lines of service, that might be expanding their current facility or looking to relocate to a new and bigger facility within the community. They also do entrepreneurial and startup programs. So it's a variety and different types of service within Salem. It's funded through urban renewal and general fund because a lot of the spaces that we have available happen to be within our urban renewal areas, and that's what SEDCOR is marketing. For many years, they were very deeply involved in the leadership of marketing the Mill Creek Corporate Center. With the general fund portion, that funds their activities that are outside of the urban renewal areas, but within the city of Salem. So I think it'll make it a little bit more complex and limiting of their activities to occur within urban renewal areas.
Thank you. Follow up, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. So can you give us an example of a business they recruited outside of an urban renewal area, or some impact they had outside of one of our urban renewal areas?
Most, in the last, I'd say 5, 6, 7 years, the businesses have all largely been within urban renewal areas. We have had some business expansions that are outside of urban renewal areas. So there is a, I blanked out on the name. It's a Korean food processor.
Up on the Parkway?
Yes, that's outside of an urban renewal area. That's one that they've worked with. Yamasa soy sauce, which is in the Fairview urban renewal area, but we don't have tax increment. There's no urban renewal benefit there anymore. So they have worked with them on expansions and workforce issues.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And members, we are in discussion mode of the motion. Member Gonzalez.
Has SEDCOR been reached out to by anybody? No. Okay, so let me give you a little more information. Maybe it's a conflict of interest because I'm on the board of the Latino Business Alliance, but SEDCOR has been a huge partner with our small businesses. We've had 3 cohorts now. They've helped with, I think the last cohort was 67 business owners that were going to start or just started, mostly within less than 5 years of business. Most of them actually were within under 1 year or planning to open. And they were a big part of us getting about $800,000 in grants. It was SEDCOR leading the effort. They helped organize these classes with us. We helped all Latino-owned, these are all Latino-owned businesses. They provided the technical assistance part of it, even navigating the grant. What SEDCOR does is more valuable than we think. I mean, I thought they should really be reached out to and invited here to share, because this is I have no idea what this could affect, and it definitely is going to affect our ability to help all these upcoming Latino business owners, no doubt.
And just for clarity, you know me, I like to be clear. So you said that it is comprised of only Latino business owners, or is it?
So the classes are in Spanish, and
Got
even through those 30, 40 businesses, maybe a handful have been non-Latino because they're open to everybody.
Right.
And we provided English translation, which isn't the best,
It's okay.
But yeah, it is. Yeah. All from Salem. Yeah.
And make sure I'm hearing this clear. So one of your concerns is if we take that money from SEDCOR, how would that impact them down the road?
Yeah.
Got it. I just make sure that concern is on the floor. I'll get to you just in a moment. Member Villar-Brendel, Mr. City Manager.
Just for clarity's purposes, I do serve on the executive committee for SEDCOR, and I was at that committee today. They have a monthly meeting, and I did advise them that we're in our budget process, and of course, all general fund proceeds are on the table, so they are well aware of that. I do agree that it would be great to have them come in and provide a brief overview of the services that they provide and the potential reduction in services.
And I thank you for bringing this up. And I think it's important because, I'd like to put everything on the table. This conversation does impact one of our communities of color. And so I want us to recognize that whatever we decide to do, it impacts a certain community. And if we're trying to utilize an equity lens, we all have to put it on, correct? If we're going to make any changes, we all have to use the equity lens to make sure that what it impacts, we own that. Follow up, Member Villarbrando.
Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone here can answer this. I have two questions. One, do we know if the funds that come from us, from our general fund dollars, are what is funding that program, that training program explicitly? And then two, what is their overall budget? I'm curious what percentage of their overall budget this $75,000 actually is.
Is that Director Rutherford?
I don't have the information on their overall budget. Unless they have some additional grant fundings that are supporting this program, which I would need to confirm with SEDCOR, it would be our general fund dollars, because our urban renewal dollars would not be eligible to fund this.
So it sounds like to me we got some work to do on the motion. Is there any more room for discussion before moving forward? Any other thoughts about it? Member Phillips, anything you'd like to share?
I hadn't raised my hand, but Chair, thank you. I guess my question to staff is, if we were to support this motion, not saying that I have enough information to yet say I'm going to support it, would this supersede one of the motions we tabled from last week?
Well, let me answer that. So what's on the agenda is that we have to revisit two motions from last week. If we do table this one, we'll come back to it again next week. But we will finish last week's motions tonight, hopefully.
Right. Thank you for that. But the question is, since this motion, it almost seems like a substitute for one of the tabled motions. Am I wrong? Did I get that right? Yes
and no. I can't stand that answer, but yes, because we're talking about the parks. But we have.
I guess could we for process, could we restate the motion?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
I'm certainly open to tabling this to get more information, as was suggested by other members.
Member Stapleton, please restate the motion.
Sure. I move to direct staff to move up to $75,000 from business retention and recruitment / SEDCOR line item to our Parks Department to fund movies in the park, kids relays, and other community events. And I would be interested in tabling the motion if we needed to get SEDCOR here. I think that the questions that Vera Brandel asked are really important, and trying to figure out exactly how all the funds are going for these different programs. And I know that there are also other cities that pay into this. We aren't the only people who fund their programs as well, so.
Okay. And I think there's value in that. Like, I haven't suggested we table it, but there's value in that. And I think we are opening up a door. And I think Mr. City Attorney addressed this earlier, that it's a robust conversation we're having, yet at the same time, we have to be wise about what we're saying to take something from one fund and give it to another, because there are implications that could definitely impact all of our communities. Was there any more discussion on this before we discuss tabling this? Yes, Member Gwynn.
I would very much be in favor of tabling this. I would feel very uncomfortable moving forward without having input and more information from SEDCOR.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Member Manville.
Yeah, I would just move that we table this until next week.
Okay. Second. It's been moved and it's been second, so we will continue this conversation. I don't want to vote these days, do I? There's a lot I could say about not wanting people to vote, but I won't say it. All those in favor that we table this until next week, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it passes. We'll pick this up next week, Member Stapleton, so thank you. I do want to say we are currently at 8:07. Members, would you be in favor of a short break and then we'll come back to reconvene? Okay, so it's 8:07. We'll reconvene at 8:15. Oh, it's like a worm. We are slowly coming back, and as we come back, I just want to set the stage for where we're at. So still on the agenda, we still have the CFO that's going to share with us, and then once he's done with his result area, we'll have some questions or comments from the members. And once that part is done, we'll move forward and close out with the motions from last week from Member Cohen. So that'll be the kind of like the lay of the land. And I do not have any, public testimony coming up unless there's a surprise. And hopefully there isn't. Okay, good. Good. So we're only missing members Belichick's and member Gonzalez. So
Just go ahead.
Go forth, Mr. CFO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure is the next results area we'll review this evening. It begins on page 135 of the city budget for the operations side and page 203 for the construction budget. So we're going to talk about both. The results area has a total budget of $164.1 million, approximately 23% of the total citywide expenditures. The construction funds have a total budget of $175.9 million, representing an additional 24% of the total expenditure budget. I will note there is a sharp decline there, similar to the explanation you heard from Callie for the URA. We're working to reduce budget authority to more closely match actuals. There are 291.7 FTE included in this results area. There were 7.5 FTE added to this results area to address increased demand or support new initiatives. 3 positions will create a second dig crew to assist with a backlog of wastewater collection maintenance projects to reduce inflow and infiltration of groundwater into the system. 2.5 FTE are proposed to meet increased demand for service for utility billing customer service and dispatch. 1 program analyst to move AI efforts in the Public Works Department forward, and 1 program coordinator in engineering to support required reporting and compliance efforts and administrative processes. Transportation has several enhancements planned for this next fiscal year with pedestrian intersection, street, and sidewalk improvements. Some projects include intersection improvements and a new traffic signal at Liberty Road South and Davis Street South, an overcrossing planning study for a pedestrian crossing over Oregon Highway 22 between Lancaster Drive Southeast and Cordon Road Southeast, design and construction of slurry seal asphalt resurfacing on various city collector and residential streets. A few project highlights for the water utility include water line replacements at several locations on Portland Road, Commercial Street, and State Street. Sorry about that. For the wastewater utility, some highlights this upcoming year include completion of the wastewater collection system master plan, a pilot program for large diameter sewer pipe closed circuit TV and sonar inspection, improvements to emergency generators at sewer lift stations, rehabilitation of the south secondary clarifiers, and relocation of the Ferry Street lift station. The stormwater utility has several projects planned, including a replacement of a failing culvert under Deer Haven Drive Northeast, and design and construction of approximately 220 linear feet of storm drain to Ward 6 to alleviate localized flooding on a needed drive west of 38th Avenue Northeast. This concludes the presentation. Staff are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CFO. Members, are there any questions or comments on the floor?
I have a question.
Mr. Mayor, please.
Thank you. Josh, I was curious, what is driving the need for an additional meter reader? Is it strictly just due to growth, or what's the need? What's driving that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Public Works will be able to answer this question.
Good evening, Alicia Blaylock, Public Works Department. Yes, it's growth. We haven't added meter readers or field reps in years, probably 10 years.
Gotcha.
Same for the dispatcher.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, thank you. Ooh, the members are intense. They're all looking through the pages, contemplating their question. Member Stapleton, please.
Thank you. There's a lovely picture of this on page 153, but I've been noticing more green paint around town. I was wondering if we could get an update on that. You know me and bikes.
It's paint. It's green. It's on the pavement.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy.
Yes, we are trying to catch up on adding green pavement markings for our bike lanes, and what we're looking at specifically right now is to try and catch up where there are right turn lanes, and the bike lane that has to cross through between that right turn lane and the through lanes. So we are quite a ways behind on green bike paint, and we're trying to make an effort to pick that up. I think we're planning on doing about 15 locations this summer.
Awesome, thank you. I really appreciate this. I know as a driver of a vehicle, when I see green paint out of the corner of my eye, I know that I should be looking out for people on bikes. And so, and of course, with these right-hand slip lanes is really important too. Those are really vulnerable places for people on bikes. So I really appreciate this. I've noticed a lot of them out on Lancaster. And I know that from my work with SCATs that really is a high impact, highly utilized area of town for all modes of transportation, but it also has some really high safety concerns. So I appreciate your attention in that area, and also noticed them out on South Commercial, another area that has some safety concerns. So I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to seeing them all around town.
Yeah, I would just add, the Oregon Department of Transportation last year completed an analysis, and they used the city of Salem as a pilot project. And so they looked at all the point of conflicts across the city for issues between vehicles and bikes. And Julie Warnick, who's with us here tonight, actually helped work with ODOT on that plan. And they had a rating system that they used their criteria for. We actually took that data and applied our equity data and our scoring criteria to it to come up with locations so that we can go through a prioritized order of implementing those strategies.
And Mr. Director, that study you just mentioned, that data, we have access to it?
Julie, I'm going to look at you. Is that on the web somewhere that everybody could take a look at that, or is that something not currently? We can get that information to the committee.
And that's what I'm asking, because in my head, someone is asking, hey, where can I see that? Only because if we're going to share information in regards to safety, I think there's value there, right? There's value in making sure that who's ever driving or who's on the bicycle, if you're walking, is just good that we can all be, have the same access to information. So thank you.
Yep.
Member Stapleton.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. There is also a safety study being done that I know might be better for folks to digest, I think, maybe. And that's being done by SCATs. And Julie knows about this too. And I think that should be done in the next couple of months and posted for the public. But all of that information is out on the website. And maybe, Julie, I don't know if that information is linked to the city's website. I don't know how that connection is made or how people find the SCATs information versus the city information. Could you come and clarify that? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Good evening, Julie Hansen, the Transportation Planning Manager with Public Works Department. And the SCATS is doing a Metropolitan Transportation Safety Action Plan that covers both Salem and Kaiser, as well as the unincorporated portions of Marion County. And that information is on their webpage. And SCATS stands for the Salem-Kaiser Area Transportation Study. That is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for our area. It is staff draft by the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments. And so I guess when we follow up with that other study, we can provide a link to their webpage and the information that they've developed. And as Councilor Stapleton said, they will be finishing up that study in the next few months, probably not a couple months. But one of the things that they did that was, I think, quite interesting is developed the high crash network. So they basically looked at the statistics to see where are the high crash network areas around our region, and they have that in a map that's very digestible. The other study, the ODOT one, is not as digestible.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yes, we'll start with Member Manville, and then we'll have Member Cohen.
Just to compliment on the city staff, Ms. Hanson and the Public Works staff for the Union Street Bikeway and for the council leadership, particularly Council Stapleton's leadership on that. It makes that commute for me so much more relaxing when I'm on a bike or in my car or walking even. It's just an amazing feeling of what the community can be when it's welcoming to people in all modes. So thank you to the city and the council for that.
Well stated. Member Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. The Eugene Water and Electric Board, EWEB, just recently completed a project that was two 7.5 million gallon concrete water storage tanks that are made to withstand major earthquakes. So the first question about that specifically, has the city of Salem considered doing a project of that nature? If not, why not? And two, because the Cascadia earthquake is going to happen sometime, what are we doing to prepare for that, to make sure that our infrastructure could withstand that event? Thank you.
Great questions. We're about to get into natural disasters. Public Works, please.
Yes, so we have done a seismic resiliency study of all of our water system. So we do have that report, and we're using that information then to score projects to then move into the CIP. I'm not sure if Alan Dannon is here, if he'd have a better idea of what projects have made it in to date from that seismic study. You can address the committee.
Good evening, Alan Dannon, City Engineer with the Public Works Department. I made it to the podium without tripping, so that's step one.
Congratulations.
Regarding water resiliency projects in the CIP, the big one right now is seismic rehabilitation project for Fairmount Reservoir, which is one of the main reservoirs for the largest service area on the east side of the Willamette River for downtown. So that's the first and biggest project of that type in the CIP right now.
Thank you. Member Going, were the questions answered?
Just thinking about all the other infrastructure for when the earthquake happens. How's the city looking for being resilient and helping out its citizens?
Okay. Member Stapleton, and then we'll go to Member Dixon.
Alan, could you, I would say that ODOT's project on the bridge is going to be key for water infrastructure. Could you speak a little bit to that as well? Because that's happening very soon.
Sure, glad to. Thanks for the question. Yeah, so for the folks who don't know, ODOT has a project in the works to seismically retrofit the Center Street Bridge to help it withstand that large earthquake event. The city, has a 24-inch water main that goes across that bridge, so it certainly behooves us to supply West Salem to have an intact water pipeline. So as part of that project, we're actually looking to upsize our water line on that bridge to 36 inches so that we'll have a stable supply across to West Salem in that event.
And I'm not sure that everybody knows that West Salem gets their water from that source. There is no, that is the source for West Salem's water, correct?
That is a very good point, yes. All the water comes from the other side of the river to West Salem. We do have reservoirs on that side of the river that store water for West Salem.
Okay. Thank you. Member Dixon, and I also saw Member Phillips. Member Phillips, you just took your hand down. Okay. Member Dixon, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to know if the seismic resiliency study for the water system is available, and if it is, if it's understandable to a layperson.
Good question.
Yes, I believe it would be available, and it should be understandable. It's not real detailed with structural calculations. It's more of an overview of what the consultants found when they looked at our system. The only things we have to be careful of sometimes are with the state of the utility and trying to make sure things are protected from terrorist activities. You know, sometimes we have to be a little bit careful with that data. I don't think that this would be one of them, but I will check with staff, and if it's something we can link everyone to, we will certainly do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Phillips, and then Member Gwynn, I believe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff. And my colleague Stapleton, thank you for mentioning the seismic retrofit that's coming to the Center Street Bridge. I have served on SCATS for the past couple of years, which is the local metropolitan planning organization that was mentioned by Julie Hansen. Thank you to Julie for all her work there. And I want to appreciate the staff not just mentioning that the bridge seismic retrofit that's coming. I believe it's in kind of getting towards the middle or end of design, does include the water. And I have attended some of those information sessions, both at SCATS and for the MWAC, which is another thing I serve on. So, you know, those things are being looked at by staff and followed very closely. I guess my follow-up question, mainly it's just appreciation this concept was already brought up. I lowered my hand temporarily because I was like, well, Councilor Stapleton did it. But you know, is there a way, because this does weigh on my mind as an emergency room doctor, like what the aftermath of an event like that would look like. Is there a way for us as the city of Salem to find funding outside of the general fund to kind of start a more organized process of like, what do we do to prioritize, you know, getting ready for that event? I mean, it's not 100% we're going to have an event, but it's like 30%, 37% in the next 50 years. So, you know, it weighs on minds like mine.
That is a good question. I'm looking around. Is that a Chief Nablock question? It is, isn't it?
I almost made it.
Almost.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. Of course, we manage the emergency management portion of the city for the whole city, and we always encourage citizens to be prepared for natural disasters, not just earthquakes, wildland fires, lots of different things you can be prepared for. We have a lot of information on our websites. All the fire stations are seismically retrofitted to withstand a large earthquake and be functional afterwards. We have emergency generation in all of our fire department locations, so we're prepared from that aspect. We are looking in. We have satellite phones. If the cell towers go down, you're not making a phone call, so your communication is going to be virtually non-existent. And of course, you were talking about bridge infrastructure around town, and depending on the level of the earthquake, there's, I think, 60 or 70 bridges in town, around that number. So there's more bridges than you really realize. You think about the big one over the river, but there are bridges all over the creeks. Mill Creek runs all the way through town. So transportation is going to be a challenge. It'll be a challenge for the fire department to respond to people. So what we would really encourage people to do is take the CERT course, learn how to take care of your immediate family and your neighbors, get prepared, get an emergency kit, get some water at your house, some food, some medications, basic supplies that you're going to need to survive for that first 72 hours, because likely you're going to be on your own that first 72 hours. In a large event where we shake for 4 to 5 minutes, we're going to go back to the Stone Age, basically, for that first couple of weeks and even beyond that. So certainly there's always things we can do, but if you can prepare yourself, and your family, then you can take care of your neighbors. And that's what that course teaches you to do. We offer that many times a year for people to come and learn about all those skills. And they get a certificate, and then they're a member of the CERT team. And I know some of the counselors have done that, and it's a good way to prepare yourself to take care of yourself during those types of emergencies. Because emergency services will be immediately overwhelmed instantly.
I agree. Thank you for sharing that. It sounds like, doesn't sound like to me. I believe that we do need to have more conversation about that. So I'm open for ideas and suggestions, not necessarily saying that it's this committee that needs to talk about it. But if we can be part of the catalyst to get that conversation going, I think there's value there, especially as we think about our neighborhood associations. How many do we have? 17? Is it 17 of those? Finding a way to where we could engage them. And, this is going to be a hard conversation for some of us to have, but I think there's value there. When we think about individuals that are, living at the poverty level or even below, this really impacts a lot of people in Salem that that will need the help if we are, have this, natural disaster come our way. And so a part of me saying that is we have to find a way to have these courageous conversations because it's not a conversation of if it'll happen, it's when. And as Chief NeBlock said, it's how do we be prepared for that? And so I'm open for greater conversation around that, so thank you, sir.
The other thing I would add is these classes are free. There's no charge for them. We also cooperate with several of the neighborhood associations strategically around the city with emergency caches. So they've got some medical supplies, some backboards, some kind of the things they're going to need as a CERT team to respond and help their local community. So we're trying to be as prepared as we can without being over prepared. But just if the general public can take enough interest to educate themselves, and there's plenty of stuff on the internet city website, a lot of emergency management information on there. I think the Statesman Journal did an article a couple of years ago, over like 13 weeks, how do you build your kit for your house? So there's plenty of detailed information out there. The CERT program is a good way to learn about all the things you need for your kit and how to be prepared, and we're happy to provide that for the community. And I think we've got over 3,500 people that have been through that training, and maybe it's a little more than that, but we put 30 or 40 people through regularly that training.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Member Phillips, did you have another question, sir?
Nope, I think that covers it. I mean, I guess my specific thing is I appreciate all the work that we're doing, and I agree with everything Chief NeBlock had said. I really think this is important to talk about. But like the specific question I don't really need an answer for tonight. It's just, is additional funding needed? And is there a way to get that funding not through the general fund? We have adequate staff resources to really, look at this, and prioritize what we need to do next. Is it water storage? Is it, additional caches, medical supplies? A lot of this is clearly, right now it's relying on volunteers. And I think that's going to be vital, but it seems like, there might be some need for funded, staff leadership on this too.
Well said. Mr. City Manager?
I don't have a response in regards to the operational issues, but from a physical infrastructure perspective, every project that we are implementing now, including the seismic retrofit of this building, is specifically designed and intended to address those questions. So as we're building new infrastructure, we're thinking about, the longer term implications. The operations building, the fire stations, and those sorts of facilities are going to be at least standing after that earthquake, if not operational. So we'll continue to do that, and then of course continue to look at our needs, as we are all well aware, are beyond what our capacities are, and certainly emergency management is one of those needs. So,
well stated. Any other follow-up questions on the floor? Comments, Vice Chair?
Thank you. It's not question. It's more that I have recognized how one of my neighborhood associations or neighborhoods has done an excellent job in coordinating their local neighbors and into a program and helping them make it seem not so hard to get ready for an emergency. And I've been working with the CERT trainer, Joe Hutchinson, and we're really trying to get the neighborhood associations to be enthused about getting their training, CERT training, and then supporting the neighborhoods within that neighborhood association to do this. And I will tell you, it is still real hard. It's so overwhelming. It feels so difficult to coordinate a few blocks of people to collect things and know who can do what and what abilities that someone has that they didn't know. And I finally decided, it was just actually last week, I felt like, okay, instead of me keep asking other neighborhoods to do this, I should just do it myself, and then I can try to go around and train. So it is a collective community thing. We really do have to focus on it. We might have some supplies in our house already, but there's still a lot of efforts in making sure that our neighbors are okay, and then the people that are not able to move are going to be helped. So anyway, it's just a big thing, and I'm trying, but it's hard. Thank you.
I would agree. Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other additional comments on the floor? Member Curtis, was there something you want to share? None? CFO, anything else from you or your team? Okay. Well, staff, thank you very, very much for your presentations tonight. Obviously, we know we have quite a few more to go through. So on the agenda, we do want to pick up from last week a couple of motions that Member Cohen had presented to us, and so we want to go back in to discuss those. And to preface that, the recorder is actually going to read those motions for us to make sure that we are ready to go, and I don't want to miss any detail from that. But one thing I do want to say, you know, when we are in this chamber and we're discussing, you know, line items and we're discussing, you know, jobs and whatnot, I want us to be mindful that those are people's livelihoods that we're discussing. And so when we start talking about, you know, salaries and who has this job and this person doesn't need a job, I just wanted to be mindful of that language, is because people are watching us, whether they're in the space or whether they're at home. I just want us as members to be mindful of the words that we share, because our words have power and they do impact. And I just want us to be mindful that we can have some grace for those individuals that may be impacted by the decisions we make here. Does it make sense? Okay. Madam Recorder, would you please share with us the first motion?
Yes. The first motion was refunding of the J.C. Relays, movies in the park, and concerts.
Okay. That is the motion. So, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. In light of the earlier conversation on this same topic, I move that we table this motion again until next meeting.
Second.
Okay, so make sure I heard that. So we're going to table this discussion in light of the previous motion because it all goes together.
Correct.
Got it. Makes sense. There was a motion. It was second also. Now, the second motion.
No, we've got to deal with this one first.
Deal with this one first. All right, let's deal with this first one. Discussion.
Yeah, I just think that these are dealing with the same topic, and I feel like we ought to wait to make a decision on that once we have all of the information, which is we're going to get information next week from SEDCOR, so then we can make the best decision. It doesn't make any sense to make this decision with that one pending, so it seems like we ought to just wait and do them all at the same time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Member Geyer, yes.
Just adding to that discussion on a couple of the questions, I didn't hear this one asked. Is this possible, either one of these motions to be implemented for this summer?
Is it possible?
Yes, because I know there's some sponsorship obligations, especially for the relays. So when we talk to the community, this is a big issue. Every single neighbor I've talked to, they either go to one of these three things. And as we talk about maybe trying to find a way to solve these, are they even solvable for this summer?
And they're already moving to the platform.
Hello, Scott Archer, Deputy City Manager for Community Services. Thanks for that question. Regarding, there would be, there's been conversation about the relays, the concerts, and the movies, and potentially reinstating those. So I do appreciate the opportunity to address this, because we are behind in the planning, because we were, based on our proposed budget, we were anticipating those programs not happening. And as you may know, with these types of programs, we don't turn these around quickly. We're usually, by this date, by where we're at right now, we've usually been working on these things for probably several weeks, if not for maybe 2 or 3 months at least, and perhaps even longer than that. So the movies and the concerts, those are a bit later, not that far out, but a bit later. I think we have sufficient time to at least put something together that would resemble what the community is used to seeing. There might be a little variation, and there might be some adjustments, but I think we would be able to put those together. The relays, we're probably just about to the point of no return. Yeah, we have sponsorships and support from a community service club, and we also work with the school district on that one, and a number of schools, and them planning to put those in place. So I would need what I would say to that is I don't want to give a definite, no, we can't do that, but I would say I would love to come back to you next week and give you a more definitive answer, but perhaps we can do something that is a little bit of an amended version of that. I'm not sure. So that's the best I can say right now. But we will certainly, if the motion is, if there's a action to support us doing that, we'll do everything possible to do that. But that relay is going to be challenging for us right now from planning.
Thank you, Mr. Archer. Mr. Mayor, and then Member Curtis.
Thank you. Mr. Archer, aren't the relays in this fiscal year? So I'm a little bit confused to how they're impacted by this budget. So didn't we already approve those funds last year?
Yes. Good point. Let me talk to my staff. I think I got ahead of myself a little bit, but we are, yeah, I think we folded that into. So there's conversation about that would be the next fiscal year for the relays. The concerts and the movies are more coming upon us, but right at the beginning of the fiscal year. And interestingly, with the relays, or excuse me, the movies and the concerts, there's a little bit of overlap between fiscal years on those, so that makes that complicated. But to the relay point, you're correct, Mayor. Let me give a more definitive answer and determine what that looks like.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Member Curtis.
Thank you. That was my question too. For the relay is this May, so it's this fiscal year. But another question that I have is, we're talking about every meeting we say, let's take 75 from here and let's refund this and let's do that. And I'm kind of holding it up here, and this doesn't work that well sometimes. So it would be really nice, I think, to have just a very clear cheat sheet of, I think we have to find, isn't it $4 million, Josh, is that correct? If we were to continue services without the homelessness services, we need to find $4 million for fiscal year 2025. Am I correct on that? It's the figure that I've seen mentioned and thrown around.
Mr. CFO?
For all the reductions from the current fiscal year to next, I don't think it's quite to that level, but I can come back with that number.
So if we know that we need to find X number of dollars, and we've discussed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it's easier for me to understand what we're funding and from where, as opposed to having a motion and then tabling it and then going back and then that's hard for just me personally to follow. So I don't know if that's something that Josh and his staff could put together. And it may not be by next meeting, I don't know when.
Well, he's definitely there to speak on it, so I'll let him speak before I comment.
Yeah, we certainly have good visibility of what reductions were recommended, and we can add the context for what's being discussed now for the funding sources, just to give everyone an idea of the conversation, the funding sources, so you have it all in one place.
And so we're on the same page.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because there is a lot to track, especially when we have motions and we table it, and motion and we table it. I get it, so thank you for putting that out there. Member Stapleton?
Yes, just a follow-up. You mentioned that the school district pays for some of the relay. I am also concerned about their budget cuts due to our structural imbalance in Oregon, and how that, or if that, impacts their relays for next year as well. And wondering if you could follow up with them and make sure that we're all tracking in the same direction.
To your question, what I was referring to is we coordinate with the school district. I don't think they provide any funding, but certainly the resources are part of their planning efforts on what they can do and not do. So we'll find out about that for the next fiscal year. But what I was referring to was just more they coordinate bringing school children to the event, but then there probably are some costs with busing and staff time. So I imagine that that they would have some resource challenges around that as well.
Yeah.
So we'll
if you
find
could
out.
just double check with them that
Yes.
if they're in, then I want to be in, right? Like that's what I want to know.
Members, any other points of discussion? Yes, Member Hoy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just finding myself wondering how did this whole, well, first, so is this year not happening for JC Relays?
I think I was mixing everything up in the mixing bowl because we're close to the end of the fiscal year, but I want to confirm that with my staff, and I'll do that.
And if we're behind already in terms of marketing or planning and all that kind of thing, were folks told this wasn't going to happen, so nobody's been planning for May?
I think I was jumping ahead to next year, but pulling it back to this year because I was thinking of the concerts and the movies. So I'm going to find out and confirm that.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm just, when I saw the article come out in the paper, I thought, wow, where'd that come from? I didn't, so where was that decided that would happen?
Yeah, no, it's correct that the 2024 relays is in our current fiscal year. That is correct. So that's a fair assumption. And I think I was misspeaking about the planning for the next year. But I want to confirm that.
I appreciate that. I really do, Mr. Archer. I would like to, the impact on the community has been great. The disappointment and the fear. And I would like to know how that happened. How did something get canceled that wasn't truly canceled? And how do we get it back in place?
Yeah, I will follow up on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hoy. Thank you, Mr. Archer. Follow-up question from Member Gonzalez.
Well, thank you, Chair. I guess let's assume the relays are this fiscal year. Then it will leave the movies in the park and concerts, so that'll be less. I'd almost feel comfortable that, we direct staff to find options to fund those and not have us cherry pick where the money comes from. We rely on the staff because I don't think we have enough information and we'll have enough to really make the best decision. The staff knows what's in this book better than us, so I would lean on them.
Okay. And I think the staff, you already have that logged someplace in, does a follow-up. I'm just looking at staff, somebody say, yes, okay, CFO, perfect, we got it. Got it. Any other follow-up questions or comments before we go to a vote? Yes, Member Belichick.
Yes, thank you, Chair Brown. And reviewing the staff follow-up related to this motion that we're discussing, there is that thing about the date where it says it's scheduled to occur on May 18th, 2024, and it's doubtful there's sufficient time to plan. So we've already talked about that over and over again, but that got me reading this closely, and it sounds like the opinions from the city attorney are that funding wouldn't cover the relays or the movies in the park. See, I thought we tabled the discussion because we were going to get some clarification on if TOT funding could be used for this. And that's not what I heard from the recorder. It was just fund it, which I think is...
That was the second motion. if my memory serves me correct, right? So there's a second motion also that involves, if I'm not mistaken, recorded, involves salaries and freezing.
No, I think it's a holdover from last month. And
Right.
a new motion from this week.
Okay. Mr. CFO.
If I may, so it's kind of an interesting situation because that motion was made as an amendment to a different motion.
Yeah.
So it's really voting on that amendment. So I'd recommend, if you're tabling it, that's fine. But when it's restated, we make it very clear, or amend it to make it really clear where the funding's coming for. But the intent was transient occupancy tax or the cultural tourism fund.
Okay. So before we go further down that slippery slope, we do need to vote on tabling this particular motion from Member Cohen, and we'll tackle it next week along with Member Stapleton's motion. That's what we need to vote on. Are we comfortable, members, with voting on that?
I just had a quick.
Member Phillips, please.
I support tabling the motion, but I definitely want to support my fellow member and City Councilor Gonzalez's point. Thank you for bringing up. We might be being too prescriptive by saying which fund we're getting this from in terms of SEDCOR or TOT. So I think that staff may be able to find, $75K or $90K. And I just want to make sure they have the flexibility to bring other suggestions to us. And at the risk of kind of going on a little bit of a tangent, I know that this impacts a lot of people and that this has been talked about in news articles and is getting a lot of attention. But I guess my rhetorical question I do not expect an answer to, but is this really the most important $75,000 to $90,000 that we might be moving around? Or is there something else that we're missing out on by talking about this that should also be looked into? I definitely think this is getting the most attention, so it probably is the most important. But again, it's a rhetorical question. I support tabling this, and I think the way it's written in this is actually the best, is just directing staff to find a way to fund it, not being so specific in terms of tying it to any one source.
Thank you, Member Phillips. And I think I said this before, and it looks like I'll be saying it again tonight and next week, and Mr. City Attorney spoke to this, is that when we are having conversations about taking, money from this particular fund to this particular fund, great conversation for us to have. I think we just have to be mindful that people are listening and watching us, because once we open up this particular pathway or box, I'm not convinced that we can close it. Not saying that there's a need to close it, but I think there is room to be very wise when we're having conversations about shifting funds. So having said that, is there any additional comments or questions before we move to a vote? I can sense some unease in this space. Okay, so all those in favor of us tabling this particular motion, which was originally by Member Cohen, we're going to table it and deal with it with Member Stapleton's. All in favor of us tabling it, please say aye and show up your hands.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are no opposed, so the motion passes. And we will pick this one up next week. Now, before we go to the next one, is there any additional thoughts or comments on the floor? Because I'm looking at some furrowed brows, so I just want to make sure that we can make sure we got things covered. Any thoughts, Member Allen, you wanted to share with us? None? Okay. Next week. You're saving it all for next week. Got it. Member Gonzalez? Okay. Member Curtis?
Sorry, I'll try to unfurrow my brow. I guess just my feeling about telling staff that they have to come back to us with cuts. Isn't that what the budget originally is staff input and then to the city? So they've already done this, I think, and maybe I'm wrong there, and maybe there's some wiggling around you can do, but it seems like we got a budget that we have had some issues with because, it cut back some community programs and services that we as a committee and our community feels are important. So sending it back to staff seems like we've already done that. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, 2 cents is worthy of being spent. Mr. City Manager.
I do appreciate your comment, Member Curtis. I I think the motion is helpful, though, in that you've clarified what your priorities are here, and that these programs are a priority, and now Josh and I and Scott and the rest of the team can go back and look at what our options are and come forward with either a recommendation or recommendations for how to fund this relatively small increment here that we're talking about. The city is not completely out of money. You know, we do have a general fund reserve. There are, you know, multiple sources here and multiple paths forward, and we will come back with at least one path to solve this small problem.
Any additional thoughts or comments? Member Hoy.
Thank you. Just to the city manager, and maybe you're the person to answer the question, but when the news came out in the paper about this, the cut of the just JC relays, for instance, were the people who put this on, and I don't honestly know who that is that city staff who puts this on, who decided not to pursue JC relays for 2024?
I think Deputy City Manager Archer has already spoke to that, and that he's going to be coming back with information to clarify sort of the chain of events here related to that and what the reality is associated with it.
Thank you.
I don't have a better answer than that.
So it sounds like there's some confusion. There's some confusion that's here, and it sounds like to me that we do have a plan. The plan is that the staff's going to go back and clarify and bring some answers back to us. I do realize that there is some discomfort with that. Would that be fair to say, Member Hoy, that there is some discomfort we have with what you're sharing with us, that you need more information?
Well, if I'm going to be honest, yes.
Well, no, please be honest. That's what we want.
There's discomfort.
Right.
Because this city and the people who are interested and participate in the JC relays are incredibly disappointed.
Right.
And looking to us for answers. And it wasn't a question that needed to be answered at this time. So I'm very concerned about that.
Right. Thank you for sharing. And I think that's one of the goals, right? The goals is that the people that we are representing are speaking on behalf, make sure that they're heard, is that this is the place where we can hash it out. This is the place where we can get all those questions answered. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Any other additional thoughts or comments before we move forward? Because we still have one more motion. Okay, so there's a second motion that we need to unpack, and that, Madam Recorder, would you please read that motion for us?
All non-represented, non-union managerial supervisor position salaries are frozen to the FY 2024 levels.
Thank you. So that is the motion that is on the floor for discussion. Member Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. City Manager Keith Stigley, there's a term you use when it comes to budgeting. You know, one city, there's a term you use. What is it? You know, like when you guys are all in it together, there's a term you use. You used it before.
First team, enterprise.
I think first
approach.
team, maybe it was that. Yeah, and you know, going back to the, you know, taking from one project to another, from one budget to another. If I was in the city, I'd feel like now my coworkers could be my adversaries. You know, I just feel like that it just starts becoming like that. And that's how I see this too. I see us trying to separate a few. I don't like that overall. That's sort of my comment. Just overall, we need to keep unified, especially the people in this room and the staff of the city staff.
Thank you for sharing, Member Gonzalez. Comment on the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor. I completely agree with your comment. That's exactly what I'm feeling. And I don't like this motion at all. I hope we reject it. I think that it's trying to solve a problem on the backs of public employees in a way that is not fair, is actually kind of cruel, and is not something that we should be considering. So I'm definitely not going to support this motion. Like you said earlier, our words have ramifications, and I think that this motion has already had many negative ramifications on our staff, and I want to do whatever I can to reject that, because our staff does a lot more than they should be asked to do, and they do it generally without complaint, and yeah, I'm just going to vote against this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Additional comments for discussion? Member Manville. Member Manville and then Member Phillips.
Yeah, I do appreciate the thought experiment from this motion, Member Cohen. It made me reflect on a lot of things. But it's not a motion I can support. I went to graduate school at a school of government, and one of the interesting things about that school of government is that most people did not go into government service afterwards. They went into consulting, they went into other things, simply because the public sector wasn't attractive enough. And I feel like that's a problem. Not that money is the driving force of everything, and I really appreciate all the public employees here. But I do want to say that public service is incredibly valuable and should be valued. Yeah, I also think it would probably just be counterproductive in terms of risking staff turnover, the loss of institutional knowledge, and the loss of leadership that we've had for a long time for the city. So, I appreciate it. It did make me think, but it's not a motion I can support.
Thank you, Member Manville. Member Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. I too appreciate the thought exercise to an extent. I do want to highlight that I heard the executive leadership team said that they were voluntarily not taking a COLA this year, and that's just the top leadership, not like the in-between leadership. I think that this motion is overly broad. I think it sets a bad example. That being said, I understand that there's a like a countrywide phenomenon that we're all angry at the incredibly absurd amounts that CEOs in the private sector are making. When they're making 300, 500, 1,000 times what their general employees make, I get that that causes rage. But that's in the private sector, in the largest of the corporations on this world. This is general government. While some of the people at the top might make close to what I make as a physician, this is not golden parachute territory. These are public servants with a lifetime of knowledge and hard skills that we can't replace. The only thing I feel bad about is not asking for, one example, our current Deputy City Manager, Kristen Embury, to tell us about her 3 titles that she's currently fulfilling. She's our HR director, our IT director, and a deputy city manager. There's no way to replace her with one person. She's doing the work of literally 3 full-time positions. So I have said last week, and I'll say it again, to the best of my knowledge, we have the leanest administration and the leanest city staff of any of the large cities in the state of Oregon. I mean, prove me wrong. Like, there's just, we're cutting bone, we're cutting brain tissue. It's just wrong, and I can't support it.
Thank you, Member Phillips. Member Cohen, would you like to share more about your motion? Any thoughts?
I don't have too many thoughts as it's 9:10 and my 2-month-old continues to wake me up at 3 o'clock every morning. What I will say is this: if we are tied in knots about freezing some salaries of our top 8 employees, next year and the following year are going to be even harder. Next year and the following year are going to be even harder. So take that into consideration when you're voting on this. Every penny we save today means something down the stream that we are saving there too. And I'll leave you on this, something my Navy captain told me. What is popular is not always right, and what is right is not always popular. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cohen. Member Allen, any thoughts?
I just had a question. the way the motion is written, and perhaps Josh or the city manager can help me out, but I don't know how many people are in there, but I would guess it's 40 or 50 or 60 people that this motion would cover, not 8. So, because it was all non-represented employees, and I don't know how many you have, but it's a heck of a lot more than 8.
Yeah, I don't have that total. I don't know if Krishna has it offhand. I can look it up real quick, but
it's
well over 100.
Thank you. That's probably good enough for now, is that this motion actually covers well over 100 people.
And
255.
255 people, thank you.
255. Comment on the floor, Member Gwynn.
Well, I thought we had asked about that. I mean, I thought I specifically asked, this involves people, so who are they? So I thought we were going to get something about that. Oh, we did. Okay. Where? Okay. Which one?
Did you want to talk about it, CFO? Thank you.
I'd be happy to talk about it. So it was in your additions agenda. Question 2, we provided information on department directors. As I mentioned, the larger effort would have required a motion. We didn't have that motion, so this is reflective of department directors.
Josh, which, you said it was in the additions agenda?
Your microphone, Member Allen.
That's correct. So it would have been on your desk. It's a little thinner packet. Additions agenda at the top, and let's see, from the back, about 3 pages in, question 2.
Mr. Mayor, comment on the floor.
I think the confusion is the motion was made in, regarding the broader number, and then the discussion that ensued kind of narrowed it down, but I don't think there was ever a new motion. So I think that's where there's confusion. I didn't hear what he was
The
yelling
amended
across the
motion
floor.
says, I move to do that we do what the city manager recommended we do, freeze pay at FY 2024 rates for department heads, deputy city manager to limit pay freezes to those classifications in the general fund if possible. But we already know the general fund is not legal, so just be to those positions. That was the motion that we have right here.
The original one.
No, this was the
amended
one that was amended.
And that total number,
That was
255.
amended, or the motion was by Member Phillips and seconded by Vice Chair Nishioka.
That's not what was read by the city recorder.
It is not, and it's not in my notes either. Member Gwen.
Interest.
So, hi. So what happened was there was an amended motion, and then Member Phillips had jumped in to try to also express about if there needed to be time or not, and there was kind of that back and forth. And so there was kind of at the end of that unanimous consensus that we were going to come back and revisit this topic today.
Okay.
But can I, point of interest?
Member Phillips, yes?
Yeah, so to the best of my recollection, I withdrew that motion.
So I did go back and listen. There was no formal withdrawal. So that's the issue.
There was also not a vote on the motion, correct?
Yeah, and there was also no vote on the motion.
But if there was no vote and I withdrew it, then that means there was no amended motion. That was my understanding as the maker of the motion.
And that's where I was, but I thought I was alone thinking that, so.
Okay.
And then what I understood that actually happened was we just tabled it. The motion that I made then was just to table it.
Correct. So with that table motion, was there another thought before I move forward? Member Gwen.
I just wanted to say for the record that I'm not intending this as a criticism in any way, shape, or form, but it's a little frustrating to just be told, oh, the answer's sitting on your table and it was here when you got here, and we don't have an opportunity, because it makes me look stupid. So, so it's a little frustrating.
I'm going to come back to address that comment, Member Gwen. Member Curtis.
So In our additional responses, it says we're talking about 9 FTE, correct? In the, I mean, it's the city manager, 2 deputy city managers, and 6 department heads. And
The
we
short
have a
answer to
dollar
that is
amount for
yes.
that, $78,295. That's on page 2 of what we got this evening. And that's what we're talking about, is the 9 staff, correct?
Yes, and, Mr. CFO?
If I may, that's not the motion on the table. The motion on the table is for all non-represented staff. If you'd like to amend it, you may. But the tabled motion was just for all non-represented staff.
Okay,
All non-union,
so it's 200.
255. Member Dixon.
I have a question. The number 2 on the additional responses to committee member requests indicates that the budget committee does not have the authority to mandate that no COLAs or step merit increases be provided. And as I understand it, that's what the motion would do. And if we don't have that authority, then certainly I would vote no on this. I also have concerns about the impact on morale and the ability to recruit and the politicization of the salary function. So I will be voting no, but it sounds like we don't have that authority anyway.
Right, and Mr. City Attorney or CFO, if and I'm in that same line of thinking, if this committee does not have the right to talk about or make those changes, then it's mute. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's mute.
If I may, and I don't mean to split hairs here, so the Budget Committee has full discretionary authority over the budget, which includes merit increases and COLAs. You can adjust line items. You can reduce the budget for certain departments. Similar to our agreements with bargaining units or HR rules or state law, we have to follow those rules. The eventual adoption of COLAs happens with the City Council. So what you include in the budget will be considered by the City Council, and they have the ultimate authority to approve the COLAs. So it could be included as a recommendation in the budget. That doesn't mean the City Council is going to include it.
Okay. Thank you. Member Allen?
Well, Josh, that does sound counter to what is in number 2. And again, I'm getting back to your hair splitting. And I think this was the question that I posed at the last meeting. The Budget Committee can reduce the salary line items of all of the budgets that include non-represented people. So it's whatever it is, we can make a motion and reduce the line items. We do not have the power, though, to dictate that certain staff members don't get a COLA or a merit increase. We have control over funding levels.
That is correct. You do have authority over funding levels. The non-represented COLA is adopted through the budget by the City Council. So whatever you recommend through the budget goes to the City Council. They adopt it. So this body doesn't have authority to set them. The City Council does. So if it's included as part of a recommendation, it'll be considered by the City Council.
Okay.
Sorry for the non-answer.
No, it's
No, that's-
I think there's some hair splitting, but okay, I understand.
Trust me, there is some hair splitting. Member Phillips?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I risk just continuing this deliberation when we don't need to do that. So first a comment, then a question. I mean, just because one individual or multiple individuals thinks they're correct doesn't mean they're actually correct. Like I've heard penny wise and pound foolish, but this isn't penny wise at all. And it's less than a fraction of a penny compared to the whole general fund that we're talking about. And it's more than pound foolish in terms of like the impact it would have on our city and our community, in my opinion, based on data. That being said, I think the challenging part that I'm having right now is that like there's a question that I feel like I and a couple other members are trying to get at, which is, there's like, in a way, we could make a recommendation that shrinks, COLA or merit, but we have to do it as a recommendation that goes to City Council. I think that what I need staff to talk about, just so I know that everybody's operating on the same page, including myself, is that we can't be specific to the general fund. I think what I've heard is like, we can't do that. if we make a decision, it has to affect all of the city budget? Or is there a nuance in the hair splitting that I've missed and I'm not summarizing it correctly?
Mr. CFO.
You are correct. It cannot be specific to the general fund.
So, I mean, as follow-up, I mean, that for me is just a nail in the coffin. So I'm ready to vote. I can't support the motion.
Yes, Vice Chair. Additional thoughts, comments? Member Gwynn.
My only thought is, I mean, I can't support the motion either because it's not even the motion that Mr. Cohen intended to bring forward, from what I'm understanding. So I don't know that Mr. Cohen's going to support the motion as it was read. But I could be wrong.
How about I make this even easy on everybody? I will withdraw my motion.
Motion is withdrawn. Wait, no, I'm not sentencing him. I want to talk about that. So you want to withdraw your motion?
Affirmative.
Okay. Members?
I'll second.
Has been second. Room for discussion or question now?
I guess a point of interest is the vote needed if a motion is withdrawn.
I'm going to say what he's about to tell you. I wanted to say a whole lot, but I'm not. Mr. City Attorney?
Dan Atchison, City Attorney. So it's a little bit archaic parliamentarian speak, but once a motion has been seconded, it belongs to the body, not to the maker or the second.
Correct.
So this is basically a motion to withdraw that motion. It has been seconded, and now you need to vote on it.
May I ask a question?
Well, before you ask a question, we have to vote on that. Oh, to withdraw.
To withdraw which motion?
The first one. The one that deals with the non-managerial positions.
So if I may, so perhaps the member can specify, you're intending to withdraw both of your motions, whether or not they're both on the table or not, or just which motion?
Withdraw both motions.
Okay.
And they've been seconded by Member Gwynn. Okay. I can still sense the confusion in this room. We're going to go ahead and vote on those. You're going to raise your hand, all in favor, by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Those motions have been withdrawn. Question on the floor. There should be several. Member Belichick. Please, by all means.
I'm not sure what we just voted. I didn't vote. I'm not sure what you all voted on. It'd be nice to get these things restated before we vote. It sounded like we voted to allow Member Cohen to withdraw his other motion. So does that mean?
Both of them.
Both of them, okay.
And I would say that it is confusing. It is confusing because there was one particular motion, the original motion that involved parks, the relays. Had we had the opportunity to discuss that, I think we would have been in a better position. But there was another motion that came from Member Stapleton that was then added on to by Mr. Mayor here to table that motion to deal with his first one for next week. And what I just said, I'm not going to say it again, because even hearing myself say it, it doesn't make sense. So I'm just putting that into the space. Mr. City Manager, yes.
So just to be clear, in regards to the motions that were withdrawn, they were relative to the salary issue and not to the other issues
Correct.
Related to funding different programs. And also, where we are presently in regards to the salaries is what is in this book and what was proposed. And we will go forward from there starting next week.
Are there any additional thoughts or comments before we go forward? Member Curtis.
So just to be clear, there's nothing that we're going to be voting on next week about salaries? Or is there? Nothing. We're not going to be bringing that up again. Okay.
Well, wait, I don't know.
I mean, we can, but not from the previous meetings.
Trust me, as the chair, I don't know what's going to be said next week.
No, I understand. But the discussion that we've had for 2 weeks now is dead.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any more additional thoughts or comments? Member Phillips, you got anything up there? Here, anything? I know we don't have any public comments. Member Dixon.
When you say additional thoughts or comments about this particular issue, or are you opening it up to about other topics?
Other topics, please.
Okay, I do have two that I'd like to address.
Please go ahead.
One has to do with the PERS bond debt, and I wasn't sure which results area that was under. I would have brought it up then, but I'll bring it up now. If you want to look at the page, it's page 259 of the budget. It says the city plans to pay $6.4 million in PERS bond debt, and says bonding provides annual cost savings. And I'm wondering what the projected savings are for 2025. And also, if the city reduces staff, which it has already done to a certain extent, what is the impact of staff reductions on the ability to repay PERS bond debt? So two questions, one, cost savings, and then repayment.
Mr. CFO?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2005, the city issued a joint pension obligation bond. We've seen pretty extreme savings from that bond between what the offset it's caused with PERS rates, and I can bring that back. We have some definite statistics that you would find interesting. It's a fixed debt service schedule, so if you have less staff, the rate goes up internally proportionate to the staff that's here to make sure we can pay that debt service. And I think there was one more piece. Okay.
So when you say the rate goes up, what do you mean by that?
So we have an internal calculation that we assess that pension obligation bond charge. There's a line item in the back of the book for all personal services for PERS unfunded liability. So it's allocated out to the city based on budgeted costs.
So each employee would pay a part of that through their?
It's a city expense.
Okay.
So it's on the city side.
Okay.
So each department, each fund.
Thank you.
And just for clarity, debt service does come up in the good governance result area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CFO.
Sorry, if I may, the second question I wanted to ask was about savings in neighborhood park maintenance, the reduction or elimination of summer temporary staff and then contract services. It says turning off irrigation systems. This is in the additional responses. Turning off irrigation systems in neighborhood parks and parts of some community parks would save roughly $266,000. I'd like to know how much will be saved by not removing damaged or vandalized playground, bench, picnic table, and drinking fountain amenities exceeding minimal repair levels. Do you have a cost estimate or a savings estimate on that? And that can come back.
If we may, we'll come back with that answer.
Sure, sure. And then I think this might be in the book, but is there an estimate of parks use citywide? How many people use parks on an annual basis?
We'll bring back that answer if we have it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Thank you, Mr. CFO. Okay. Before we adjourn, I do have to ask this question, and the question is there any other business for the Budget Committee this evening?
It was a rhetorical question.
If you guys only knew, I am just dying inside. I want to laugh so hard. But I do want to say this before we adjourn. These are conversations that I think are healthy for us to have, regardless of what we got to fight through and pull through. And I remember, Gwen, I do want to apologize because I think you heard something tonight. You were offended in some capacity. I want to make sure that we apologize to you, okay? Because if anything, I believe in, agreeing to disagree, but not being disagreeable. And so I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the camaraderie. And there are no public testimonies tonight. So having said that, this meeting is adjourned.